at the African Union on Housing Finance Conference, Property Technology Masterclass in Kigali. We're happy to be here. Today I have a lined up of about 8 experts in the property technology space. Interestingly, Proptech is beginning to gain momentum, and that is why we're here today. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be joined about 8 of our panelists. Co-hosting with me this morning will be Jose Maria from My Invest, who is also the General Secretary for Proptech Nigeria. Before I bring in all my panelists, I would just want to run a brief background and context around Proptech in Nigeria. So Gideon, if you can just put me on, I'll just take my slide on Proptech on my presentation now. Okay, great. Could you just confirm if my slides are up?
No, we're still seeing the page. So just open your slides up. There we go. Just go full screen.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So basically, just to what property technology is doing really, it's just reimagining real estate as a whole. And so Proptech is the intersection for property and technology. And we've seen a lot of activities in that space, especially during COVID and post-COVID. And a lot of this is going to be shared by my expert panelists this morning. So I implore you to stay back as we get deeper, as we dive deeper into the masterclass session. So what's been happening in property technology in Africa is that, interestingly, we're seeing a lot of country Proptech associations, and this is very heartwarming. And this is also saying that the community for Proptech in Africa is getting organized by the day. So in Uganda, in Kenya, in South Africa, in Nigeria, even we're beginning to have big event management companies like the API focusing on Proptech across the region. And what this means for startups and investors is that a community is being developed that is helping to promote property technology in Africa. In terms of investment, what we have also seen over the last 2 to 3 years is investment in pre-seed with startup. So we have some startups in Africa looking at across the value chain, whether it is renting, whether this is it's blockchain, whether in terms of marketing or co-living. We're beginning to see different startups across the region getting pre-seed investment. And like I said before, this is really, really interesting. Also notable is that we're beginning to see a lot of accelerator programs, technology accelerator programs, showing interest in African startups. We recently saw MetaProp bringing in close to about two or three African startups. 2 of them were from Nigeria. We also understand just a few weeks ago, Techstars from Canada also provided opportunity for accelerator for Rent Small, which is also a Nigerian startup. So you have the likes of Launch Africa, Kalon, Frontier, CRA Venture Capital, Ingressive Capital, Spark, and MetaProp. I mentioned MetaProp before, who are already providing incubation hubs and accelerator programs for African startups. And this is really, 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 really very interesting. And like I said, if you look at the slide, you see the kind of pre-seeds that we're beginning to see in the startups. Now, looking at the landscape in Nigeria, it is interesting. We have over 100 active Proptech startups in Nigeria. And I mean, just looking at 3 or 4 years ago, where you probably have about 5 to 7 Proptech startups. Now you have over 100 Proptech in the space. And this is also not just happening in Nigeria, but across the other countries in Africa, from Morocco, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda. We're seeing the growth of Proptech startups and the interest in Proptech in African region. Now, in Nigeria, for example, what's also enabling growth is the organization of the association, and we also have like an incubation hub called Prop Lab. Now, what's happening in the region are some of the things that we're going to be delving into during this masterclass. But generally across the region, the kind of problems that we are seeing, it's insufficient data, inadequate capital, and the low Proptech adoption that we're seeing throughout the region, except in some of the countries like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. We still need to do a lot of penetration in terms of Proptech, which is why we're having the conversation today on what is the level of Proptech adoption? What can we do to be able to make Proptech penetrate in the region? And you have a few startups across the region as well. I've talked about some of these before. And in terms of the ecosystem, what we are seeing, looking at Nigeria, for example, is we've seen a premium property listing platform raising seed capital and then moving on to Series A. For example, Property Pro, who raised a seed of around $230,000 about 7-8 years ago, went on to raise $1.2 million in terms of Series A. Also, we're seeing the likes more recently of Split, which is a flexible renting platform, and then Cesso Global, which is a marketplace for real estate developers. We're seeing recently rounds of pre-seed that these guys are doing. Again, this is what the kind of interest that is emerging within the region. And like I mentioned before at the start of my conversation, we are having VC and accelerator programs looking into property technology in the region. I mean, this is good news. This is really, really good news for the region, because this was how we saw progress in the developed markets, and this is beginning to happen in Africa right now. Metaprop, Token, Estate, Intel, and Split. I mentioned that before. Tech Stars Accelerator in Canada, Token, Rent Small in the Accelerator program. Co-Fundi is under the starter VC. You have Greenhouse Capital, who is investing in My Invest, and then you have also Ingressive investing in Quaba. And so the landscape is looking really, really interesting. And this is why we think that it has become very, very expedient to begin to look at adoption of Proptech in Africa, and how do we begin to push this forward. What we're also seeing in the market, and some of the conversations we are going to be having today, is what kind of collaborations do we need in the region? Okay, how do we begin to integrate APIs so that startups can begin to work together and benefit from each other and begin to work to expand that community? Another example that we see here is Estate Intel, which is a data information portal providing APIs that is helping agents and landlords on their pricing on the Zaman network. We're seeing the same thing with Split, who is leveraging on Eden's Life Home Services as a value add for their customers and for their users. So we're going to also be talking about Proptech collaborations across the region, and what we need to do to be able to take this forward. A lot more about collaborations between the traditional real estate players and the Proptech startups, because this is exactly what we want to begin to see, where traditional real estate players will begin to look at startups, and startups looking at traditional real estate players, and see how the startups can provide solutions for them. Now, what we're seeing happen already is that a lot of the traditional real estate players are even themselves developing products along property technology. And again, this is also expanding the scope of the activities that is happening in the market. So for example, you have the Filmo Real Estate, who's developing products like the Resido and Vamfi. You have Landway, who's at the forefront of Vista Front. Octo5 have a home purchase plan, which is called Store, where you can buy a house over a period of time, just doing some form of incremental payment. And then also, we also have the facility management company, AlphaMade, who is now doing some sort of retail, if you like, facility management, when you can actually call artisans to fix up whatever challenges or problem that is happening with your property. So this is across the region and across different countries. We're seeing all of this happening, and it's good news. It's good news. We're going to be hearing from a lot of our expert panel, what's happening in the different regions in terms of real estate collaboration. And that's my quick presentation to kind of set the tone for our conversation this morning. And so I'm just going to bring on Jose Maria now, so we can continue the conversation, and just to share the content, how we're going to go on this program before we bring in our panelists. Thank you very much. So Jose Maria, if you're on, you can come online.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Roland, for having me. So today is really going to be all about speaking to our panelists, trying to delve deep or get some insights on what's happening in this space based on their own personal experiences in building their businesses, being in the ecosystem, and trying to understand exactly what's happening in the African space, African Proptech space. And I know a lot of the founders and stakeholders already have been in. Sorry, Doctor, you want to say something? Yeah, a lot of the founders have also been in the industry for a very long time and have built remarkable businesses, have built remarkable companies that have raised funding, have gone into accelerators, and are doing things that would give us more courage and more zeal to actually look into the African PropTech space. That's really the core of what today's program is about. And that's really at the core of what today's program is about, and thank you so much for the amazing, presentation about, PropTech Nigeria and what's happening in Africa. We are truly at the point where everything is actually booming. And even though it's at the earliest point in the PropTech space, especially in funding, we're going to see remarkable progress in the coming years. And that's truly, truly amazing for us.
Okay, great, Jose Maria. Thanks for joining me. So I'm going to bring in our panelists this morning for the first session of this morning. I have Emeka from Co-Funding. Emeka is based out of Ghana and doing basically crowdfunding transactions. Emeka will tell us a bit about Co-Funding, and then Ghana, and then what is John. Also, Dr. Daniel Gambero is also joining us this morning. Dr. Gambero, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Gambero is coming out of Southeast Asia. He's the president of Proptech Malaysia. We also want to hear from him how property technology is gaining ground in Malaysia, and what use cases he might be able to share with us in Africa. And so thank you so much. I think Precious is supposed to be with us now. I don't know if she's Jose Maria, was she able to connect? Okay, great. Precious, I'm happy to see you. Thank you were able to connect.
Yeah, sure.
Precious is joining us out of the UK. She's the Chief Growth Officer for LiveEnd. LiveEnd is being developed by Construct, and basically they are looking at facility management and all of that across that value chain in the African region. I think their use cases started from Nigeria, so she's going to be able to talk to us on that. Also this morning, Sean. Good to see you, Sean. I'm glad you made it for this session. Sean
Right.
Sean is from SA Proptech. He's also organizing property technology in Africa. So I'm very excited because I have a huge expert panelist here this morning in this first 1 hour of this program, just to talk around adoption of property technology in Africa. So I'm going to start with Emeka. It's not your only take. I'm going to come around as much as possible to everyone. Where do you see what's happening? First of all, how has co-funding evolved, right? What are you seeing in Ghana? In other markets that you are getting to, what do you think is the level of Proptech adoption? And then we will come to challenges later, but just in a general sense, just to start this session. Over to you, Emeka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roland. I think it's a very, very exciting opportunity to be on this panel. Everything you've said, I think, has just essentially portrayed that the PropTech sector is booming. Just 4 years ago, you would say PropTech, and people would ask you, "What does PropTech mean? What exactly is that?" But I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. In fact, PropTech is beginning to even create its own sub sectors like Contech, which is construction tech, and other sub sectors under PropTech itself. But just to speak on my experience in Ghana, I would just say that people are, housing is one of the most basic needs that anybody has, and PropTech companies essentially provide a way for people to access real estate in a way that has not been accessible to them in the past. And people are always looking for those opportunities, whether it's to invest, whether it's to get rental assistance, whether it's to get monthly rental programs, things like that. People are always amenable to those kinds of things. So when you see people, PropTech companies, both in Ghana and in Nigeria, run campaigns, at the very least, there is that extreme excitement in the beginning because people want to know more about it. So I would say that as the adoption of mobile technology is increasing, more people are using mobile phones, smartphones. It's also, you can sort of see a trend line where those same people are also downloading PropTech apps, like investment apps, rental assistance apps, and beginning to use them more and more. So I can only assume that as mobile adoption continues to grow, as smartphone adoption continues to grow, you also, and as internet penetration continues to grow on the continent, you also begin to see more people begin to take advantage of the opportunities that these PropTech platforms are offering to them. So that's been my experience so far.
Okay, great. I mean, what I hear you say is it's PropTech adoption is on the same trajectory as mobile technology. As mobile technology is improving, and I think it makes a lot of sense, to look at that from that angle. Dr. Danielle, so tell me, what's happening in Malaysia? What's happening in Southeast Asia? And I will come to what lessons we can take, from how you have evolved in Africa. But I mean, just give us a general perspective of what's happening with adoption of property technology in Malaysia first, and then in Southeast Asia generally. Thank you.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Dr. Roland, for having us here from Malaysia. I'm Dr. Daniele Gambaro, the president of the Malaysia PropTech Association. As Emeka was saying just 1 minute ago, and I couldn't agree more with you, adoption, penetration of Wi-Fi, internet and Wi-Fi, adoption of mobile devices in general, can be a tablet, a handphone, or a laptop, are the two main drivers of a huge adoption. We have been seeing it here, adopting technology, call it PropTech, FinTech, EduTech, HealthTech, depends on these two drivers. In Malaysia, we have been experiencing a real upgoing trend at very much hyper speed, allow me to say so, during the last 3 years, because point one, propagation and use, adoption of mobile devices is everywhere. In Malaysia, we have a 132% ownership rate of mobile devices, which means every Malaysian has at least one mobile device plus something. So which makes very easy to reach the people. Point one. Point two, the past 2 years of pandemic, which has been very, very bad here in Malaysia. We have had a number of movement control orders, total lockdown, starting in March last year and then continuing second half of 2020. And for the first half of 2021, our economy was completely locked down. This has been bringing a additional acceleration of adoption of Proptech solution. In terms of Proptech solution, Malaysia, which is not a big country, we are only 32.5 million people, we already have more than 350 startups in Proptech and Contech. You cannot forget Contech. Contech is a very important component of the Proptech structure. And of course, real estate fintech, which is absolutely indispensable to complete all the transaction along the way. But definitely, as Dr. Roland, you were saying a few minutes ago, the big opportunity of the future, as I look at it, is in Proptech and Proptech solutions. Without experience that we are living in this moment, without keep on reinventing the wheel, but coming more to a integratable API, as you were mentioning, kind of ecosystem where I do have a platform. Then I know that Dr. Roland has a interesting solution for a small part of my problem statement. I talk to you, I do not redevelop the whole solution, and is a collaborative platform which push the whole industry to the next level. This is what the Malaysian Proptech Association has been strongly experiencing in the last 12 months, where we have been stepping to almost 100 members. We are, say, about 20 members away from 100. But in the last 6 months, we have been getting at least 5-6 new startups joining us. So adoption is going and is moving very fast. Another strategic point of acceleration of this adoption comes from the help of the government. Malaysia, thanks God, has a number of agencies which are providing accelerators, which are providing sandboxes, which are providing mentorship services to the private startups, kind of a graduation program for startups. There are agencies in the government which are providing funding. The pre-seed and seed funding is quite easy to be obtained through these government agencies. So all this has been spurring the whole ecosystem of Proptech and Contech to a totally different level. We are now ready to the next big jump. And by the way, MPA, Malaysian Proptech Association, is organizing at the end of November this year, 26th and 27th of November, a regional summit to discuss, present, and promote the use of Proptech solution to ease all the different pain points, and are many, which are still in the industry. Big obstacle that we have been encountering, the fact that real estate built environment, at least here in Southeast Asia, but I've been in real estate business all around the world, and I know that it's almost the same everywhere, is not a transparent industry. There is still too much of, allow me to say, hanky-panky, trick and take, I undercut you, all this flexibility, which has been for hundreds of years in the market, is very difficult to be eradicated. And Proptech is based on transparency and trust. So a bit action in slowing down this adoption comes from those powerful players who are having all the possible interest in maintaining a non-transparent environment. However, the market is extremely fast and positive in their adoption of Proptech. Sorry for the big sound, but we have a big storm here in Kuala Lumpur. Over to you, Dr. Roland. Thank you very much.
Very interesting points, Dr. Daniel. Very, very interesting point. I think I'm happy to see that in the region, in African region, it looks like we're on the right path, just hearing what you are also looking at. But one key thing, stuck out for me, and I'm sure the other panelists in the different countries will have a lot to say around that, and that is government involvement. I think the things you mentioned around government is very, very big. We'll come back to all of that conversation, how government is helping with accelerator programs, creating sandboxes, and also even funding pre-seed. I think that's already a takeaway from me. I'll quickly come over to Precious. So again, Precious, just a general overview of what's happening in the UK in terms of property technology, where the adoption is at, and where you see, looking at what the product of Livent and what you guys are doing at Construct, how is that also going to help a lot more adoption? Just on the general bits for now. So again, what's happening in the UK in terms of Proptech? How is adoption in the UK? Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much, Dr. Roland, and thank you to the speakers, Dr. Danielle and Emeka, and Jose Maria and Sean. I think there's already almost like a theme going through all the speakers at the moment in terms of Proptech. Proptech adoption probably 4, 5, 6 years ago was very, very slow, I think globally, quite frankly. And I think there's now a level of growth and acceptance within the markets. I'll speak in the UK, but also equally about Nigeria, because Livent and Construct is based in Nigeria. Adoption in the UK, I think, is on a trajectory, a really good trajectory. There's a lot of support in terms of funding agencies, accelerators, investors, VCs within that space. And also, I think there's a need now with sustainable construction coming into place to build efficiencies within the industry itself. And I think Proptech is a good platform to allow those efficiencies to happen. So in terms of adoption in the UK, I think probably, I'll probably get slammed by everybody else in the panelists. We're leading in Proptech in itself, and as a member of the RICS, I think the RICS in itself is a big supporter of Proptech adoption. Now, just when I talk about Livent and Construct, where I work and I am supporting the growth of our products, I think, Dr. Danielle, you mentioned Contech and also Emeka. Contech is something that is absolutely fundamental to be included within the Proptech space. And I think that's where Livent and Construct are really operating in, understanding and realizing that there are nuances within the industry that have become a norm, and actually breaking down those nuances and lack of best practice is something that a lot of Proptech and Contech organizations are really going to try and break that barrier. And there's a lot of resistance in that space. Like Dr. Danielle actually stated that, there are traditional behaviors that a lot of people will not want to break down because it means that there's not a lot of lining within the pocket. So adoption is really, from the users, we're finding that in our use cases and in our engagement and with market, especially in Nigeria, we're finding that people are interested. People want to find solutions. People want to understand how they can actually build efficiently and how they can have that transparency, within their build, right down to a one-man band person who's building their house. They have an interest. So there is an interest on ground to actually find ways where they can have that autonomy to be able to build. So there is an appetite certainly for Proptech in Nigeria as well as in the UK. I think the API interface, the API issue, there's a plethora of collaborative opportunities. Everybody is pushing in the right direction. But actually the key thing about actually growing and adopting and actually taking that space that is available for us, it's about understanding how we can actually join the dots as people around this table and organizations to actually then have an intentional drive to actually allowing that adoption to happen. I could talk a lot more, but I'll stop a little bit until we get to the barriers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Precious. Good. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll quickly move over to Sean to give us an overview of what's happening with Proptech technology in South Africa, and also as someone that is also organizing the community of Proptech in Africa, to also then share his experience on adoption in the African region and what you're seeing. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Roland. Can everyone hear me okay? I didn't have a chance.
Yes.
Didn't have a chance to do the checks earlier. But thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you, Roland, and the organizers, AUHF and APR. Great to have the opportunity to speak on these platforms and to join such an esteemed panel. So it's really great to meet you. I think some of you I haven't met before, so it's great to connect. But yeah, so as Roland said, so I'm a co-founder of the SA, or South Africa Proptech Association, and also co-founder of the Proptech Africa Association, which generally aims to be an umbrella organization, but not to say we dictate the conversation. We look to collaborate with the great associations that have come up. So we've got Proptech Uganda, Proptech Kenya, Proptech Nigeria, obviously, where Roland is president. And then we have Proptech South Africa, and we have good relationships in other countries. So as a starting point, I'll move on to South Africa now. That alone is encouraging to see these associations coming out of the continent. So that's a big step for me. We've spoken about the adoption and these timelines of about 5 years. 5 years ago it was a very different landscape for PropTech globally. So I think a first key step is associations, and I think we spoke of community. That's something that I sort of wanted to put forward and highlight in my contribution today. I think community is crucial for any industry perhaps, or specific service offerings or professionalisms, like professional bodies, etc. And the same applies and is very important, I think, when you working with relatively new innovation or new ways of doing things. You don't want to come in and sort of ruffle feathers. You don't want to sort of tell established real estate players that you've been doing it all wrong for 30 years. You also don't want to tell the tech people they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand real estate. So the magic happens in the middle. And community is key. It's real estate, it's tech players, it's the prop tech players who are combined, it's associations, investors, VCs, public sector also is not always, the engagement's not there, or at least we're building it, but it's the willingness is there. So our community is key, and it's really encouraging to see the activity in Africa. PropTech's raising good investment, PropTech's being accepted into international accelerators, which actually there's 3 out of Nigeria recently, and I believe they're the first. So that's awesome, yeah. Very exciting space, and interesting. PropTech Malaysia, I'm quite interested in other developing markets, obviously, because there's a correlation in dynamic structure of economies, demographics. So I think Asia and South America, it's important. I've been planning to sort of open communication channels there, because I think we've got a lot to learn from each other. Not saying that Europe, the US, etc., that we shouldn't collaborate. If anything, it's important to get the balance, because I think I always say, local solutions for local problems. So don't forget what you're dealing with and your skills, resources available within your context, but obviously look for inspiration, collaboration, wherever that comes from. So that's just, I think, on community and how important that is. So in South Africa, with SA PropTech, we operate fairly informally and we volunteer driven. So we haven't got to that stage where we have membership or paid membership, etc. So it is a group of passionate individuals, putting together events, helping with introductions, etc. So in terms of where we are, I think there's room to take that a step further and formalize things. And that means sponsorship, which we have obtained in the past, but I think some dedicated resources needed. But that said, I think myself, my colleagues, we've worked hard and we've been driving the conversation. And the good thing is we've had really good interactions and sort of opinions on Proptech from investors, from the real estate industry, and it's only growing. So like our big REITs, which are big drivers, for adoption, they're a lot more interested in Proptech than they were 5 years ago. So it is getting better. Adoption's growing. The number of Proptechs are growing. So rough numbers, I did some research with the Urban Real Estate Research Unit at the University of Cape Town. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's called URERU. It's a great body doing some fantastic research on the continent across urbanism and real estate. But we did a Proptech map, which is always the great touch point, just to get a good snapshot of what's happening in a market. So we did that in 2019, obviously about 2 years ago now, but we had 42 Proptechs then, excluding independent co-working spaces. There's a lot of those. We include flexible space. And I've been tracking, I wouldn't say it's exact numbers, but I've been tracking what's coming out since then. And I'd say now we must be, I'd say at least on 80 companies operating in that space at different levels. So I would classify as Proptech. It's always difficult, in terms of what measures you're using. So that's a clear, at the end of the day, there's a clear sign of growth, and that's driven by adoption, by interest, acceptance from industry. There's funding coming. From what I see, again, this isn't exact, which highlights an issue that I think we need more formal research and resource going behind this. So this is something myself and my colleagues really want to drive, and there's great interest from our academic institutions. I think it just needs to push that line. I think it's a resource time thing, which obviously a lot of people to come up against. But basically, what we've seen and what I've seen is there's clear growth, as in other markets, and it's likely there's more companies than that. We got to do that kind of granular research. So, good growth, a good story of investment interest internally. There is also external investment interest internationally. I can't comment. All I can say is that it's there. And in my view, from what I've seen, I think most of our funding is domestic at this point. So it's an active, there's a thriving industry in South Africa. We also, it plays off the back of, we've got a fairly sophisticated finance and real estate industry, in terms of our financial regulation, our banks and our REITs are, follow international best practice, etc. So that's kind of the foundation we're coming from. But then, like other developing countries, we have high levels of poverty and inequality. So the activity is playing predominantly. I always say it's like it's a story of two worlds, obviously, in a developing country. So that first world element, it's great, it's important. We're seeing great activity there. And we're also seeing activity focused more on lower income, markets, property markets, etc., in terms of specific housing platforms. Also platforms that enable people with microfinance to access housing, community crowdfunding, that type of thing, which I think is really important. So I think it's, Hi, my signal dropped. I don't know if yours did. I'm still here, so I just paused what I was saying.
Okay, cool.
But just to wrap up, I think there's these two markets. Proptech can bridge, which is really cool. It can bridge, and an offering that's targeted at a REIT could be applied at other markets at different levels. And then specifically, Proptech can really unlock. It's like access to, I think, in my mind, in terms of looking at lower income sections of our population, is access to property as an investment class through crowdfunding. So it's wealth creation, wealth distribution, and then access to housing. It can enable those affordable housing providers in various ways, but also it can empower communities to come together. And then there's some cases where you won't get microfinancing, but there's arrangements with building supply sales, people who provide building supplies. So that's the form of lending you get, and there's obviously an arrangement where return will come. And then in terms of investment, it's exciting. Last point, in our township markets, so our fairly informal housing markets, backroom rentals are very prevalent. So this is where someone will have a small house, add a small room, normally, themselves, it's probably not built to standard, etc., but they rent that out. So there's platforms tapping into that, and it's a massive market, and just highlights the need for research. But there's a tale of two cities, I guess. And I'm excited for the activity on both sides and the potential of Proptech to bridge these gaps and to accelerate, the sort of the move against inequality, etc. Which I think whatever you're doing, if you ignore that, the fundamentals just don't make sense. So yeah, that's my snapshot. So thanks, Roland.
Thanks very much, Sean. I think it's particularly fascinating, your conversation around the tale of two cities. And I think that happens everywhere in Africa, really. And as we have time in the course of this conversation, I'm going to take us there really to look at how property technology really can do anything around where you have the levels of inequality, I think, keeps widening by the day, really, rather than closing, in the region. So thank you very much for that snapshot. Yeah, I mean, something that Precious also mentioned that I don't want to lose in the course of the conversation is the support from RICS, the RICS. Okay, so Precious, on the basis of that, I'm just going to start with you on government, okay, and its agencies, and what you've seen them do in the UK, and what could be really beneficial in Nigeria. For example, in Nigeria, you have the Nigerian Institution of Estate Surveyors and Valuers, which is the professional body equivalent to the RICS. And I know that you have these professional bodies, in Malaysia, in South Africa, across the region. Okay, I'm not sure that their impact is as huge as what you find the RICS doing. So I want you to start with the conversation around RICS. Emeka, please get ready. I'm going to come to you after Precious, on this same government and its professional bodies support. So what is the RICS really doing that is helping Proptech startups? And then from there, I want us to move into the area of government that Daniel has very well spoken about, issues around sandboxes, to be able to enable that ecosystem, issues around startup funding and accelerator programs. Over to you, Precious.
Thank you very much, Roland. So in terms of the RICS itself, I think there's what they're doing is raising the profile. They're a recognized body within the world itself. So everybody hears RICS, it's trusted, everybody understands what it is that they're doing. Within the UK themselves, they are providing that voice for Proptech. And you find that because it's a community of construction professionals, if I'm in a room like this and we're all RICS and we're all project managers, cost managers, etc., we're having, and there's that shared knowledge that is happening within that space. From a governmental, in terms of supporting startups, accelerators, etc., I think there's still a lot more work that they could do, if I'm being absolutely honest. So raising profile and understanding of what property technology is, absolutely tick. Actually enabling and supporting that adoption then to happen and being a real champion in terms of not just raising the voice and profile, but actually champion in terms of facilitating the institution to support that funding. Because a lot of startups are started by people that are either bootstrapping initially for themselves and then looking for funding. So I think that there's a convergence with where people are coming up with really great ideas. They've either seen nuances as a professional or as a player within the construction industry. They have the voice raised by the institutions, but actually the institutions, I think, have a duty of care to actually ensure that those ideas are not actually lost within the ecosystem. So from my point of view, when I talked about the RICS, it was more about profile raising, etc. And I think there's a gap and a space within the industry, not just the RICS, the ICE, you know, the Royal Institution of Architects, British Architects as well, because we talked about collaboration. There'll be different lenses that each of those institutions can see, and the support from government to actually bring to life some of the ideas that actually fail because there's no funding. You know, so I think that there's certainly a space, and I'll talk about governments as well in the same breath. I mean, it was raised earlier on that, you know, I think it was Dr. Danielle that talked about governments, you know, governments actually supporting and actually funding and actually creating either early investment, angel investments, or whatever it is to support these Proptech solutions. There's a duty of care, because it's not just about the private sector, small startups that are trying to actually provide solutions for a much wider, much bigger problem than actually the technology trailblazers that are creating these solutions. There needs to be that support. There needs to be that collaboration. There needs to be that, you know, that shared interest. Whether or not the number of barriers, obviously, that we talked about, and that are controversial barriers as well, in terms of actually change can be a massive disruptor to what has been a norm for a very, very long time. But actually, if we're going to sort out some of the issues within construction, I'll talk in the purpose of what we're doing at Live End. We're trying to make it affordable, transparent, efficient for every single person that is building. So if Sean wants to build his 2-roomed house or whatever it is, because maybe his income level is low, why can't Sean have the same autonomy and transparency and efficiency as somebody who's building a £1 million house? Proptech and Context sort that out. So I think there's a duty of care for governments to actually create that economy that constantly evolves and constantly provides that service and benefit to all the stakeholders within the construction industry or within the property sectors. So my take on it is, in summary, yes, there are efforts being done. Are they enough? I'll probably get shot. No, I don't think they're enough. You know, I think there's a lot of work that organizations and agencies and governments can do to actually support the trajectory that is absolutely going to drive benefits and support sustainable construction. You know, because Proptech will support sustainable construction. It won't be a conversation. It will be an action. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Precious. I think you just brought to light the tale of two cities with what you guys are doing at Cutstrut. You know, and I totally agree. You know that that inequality. You know, Proptech should find a way to close that gap. Emeka, I'm going to come to you as I promised, right? On what's happening in Ghana. What's the government doing? Are the professional bodies supporting your vision and your dreams? You know, and you can use co-funding as a case of how you have of not getting government support, of how professional bodies are working and collaborating. You know, with you. Go ahead, Emeka.
Sure. I think it was really interesting listening to Precious speak, especially when she spoke about the government's duty of care. You know, I think it's extremely important to note that governments are not for-profit enterprises, and what a government's duty is to essentially make life easy for its citizens, and then, you know, provide the necessary conditions that will then allow people to thrive, which will in turn return profits to the government in terms of taxes and, you know, a population that is productive. And unfortunately, on the African continent specifically, African governments have typically not oriented themselves towards supporting startups, except for notable exceptions like, I don't know, Rwanda, for example. But I think it's not just something that's really, it's not really unique to the PropTech sector. I have to say, you know, the governments have typically not supported startups and, you know, tech innovation. It's everything you listed. Most of what you mentioned in the beginning, the achievements that startups have achieved, has been in spite of, you know, lack of government support and not because of government support. And, you know, it just goes to show you honestly that just even the slightest, you know, support from the government will go a very long way towards, you know, exploding the entire sector. So let's talk about PropTech specifically. You know, in Ghana, we have a government initiative where the government is trying to, you know, invest more in affordable housing over the next 10 to 15 years, and they are doing this by investing in constructing projects themselves. And the Proptech Association and the Real Estate Association is sort of trying to say, look, don't do this. Support the sector, provide tax breaks to us. Lodge money in the banks that we can access. Give us access to low interest loans, and we'll take it from there. And you see a situation whereby most of these units that are being built by the government tend to end up, being either empty or going to just civil servants, which is a very small chunk of the entire population. So it's things like that. But not to, just not to just speak about the bad things. There's also a very good thing the government in Ghana is doing, where startups specifically have access to a 5-year tax holiday if you can prove that what you're doing is innovative enough. So, I would like to see a situation where things like this are extended more into, the construction sector, for example, to support construction of more affordable housing. I think in other countries outside Africa, there is a certain benefit and a certain, let's say, incentive that is given to developers to build affordable housing because they get some tax benefits and some tax breaks from it. So, these kinds of intelligent innovations are what we need from governments, in order to support to support the growth of the PropTech sector. Because at the end of the day, at the very core of it, what the PropTech space is trying to do is make living easy for people, and that starts from getting people into their homes easier. You have situations here in this part of the world where people will spend, I don't know, 8 years building their house, starting from the foundation, and they will build. They will put, when they have money for foundation, they will put something. When they have money to get to a certain level, they will put something. That is a very huge aberration, because homes that are built like this, especially here in Africa, tend to not be extremely strong when they are done. And then you have situations where the families will then move into those units maybe 4 years into construction, and they just complete the construction on top of their heads. I don't think I need to mention how horrifying that is. But if the person can build out their house in 8 years, why can't they get credit in the beginning of the 8 years to buy the house and just move into it? And then the money that they've been paying over a space of 8 years, they take that money and then just pay off the loan over a space of 8 to 10 years or even 15 years. So we need to be a bit more, the government needs to be a bit more deliberate about providing innovations, and I mean intelligent innovations in the PropTech and construction and housing sector specifically, that will spur the growth and allow entrepreneurs to do what we do, which is to innovate. So I mean, the government in Ghana is getting some things right, but there's also some things that leave much to be desired. So another thing I also speak to is regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchanges Commission, for example, which is supposed to regulate, the spur of investment opportunities. Crowdfunding is a huge part of the PropTech space, and without regulations, it's difficult to innovate because you don't want to sort of, step out of your bounds when you don't even know what the bounds are to start with. So those kinds of things are extremely important to also do. And then the traditional associations need to step up their game a little bit more so that we can integrate, because I mean, I think the ultimate goal is that you don't want to have a separate estate surveyors association and a separate these are things that need to come together so that we can work in tandem, because at the end of the day we are working towards the same goals. So all these little things, but I would just caveat it by end it by saying that we just need intelligent innovation from the government to support the sector so that entrepreneurs can have an easier time to do what we do. You're muted, Dr. Roland.
Okay, sorry. I think my network got interrupted. Thank you very much. I think the conversation for government is really, really interesting. So what I'm going to try and do, start interrupting my call. This particular session is wrapping up in another 5 to 6 minutes. But if you can just stay on. You can stay on for a few minutes when I bring in the other panelists. I think this government conversation is something that I really want us to really delve into. Daniel has seen government work in Malaysia. I'm going to come to you, Daniel, just a minute. I'm going to come to you. I've seen government work in Malaysia, and the kind of support in terms of funding, um, accelerator program and sandboxes. We're going to delve into that deeper. But so just hold your thoughts, Danielle. Emeka has agreed to stay on a bit. I just want, Joseph Maria, I think the issues that you and I have really discussed a lot is around funding for startups. I don't know if you want to just, speak to that and ask our panelists to just quickly go around. I think we have about, 5 to 10 minutes to wrap up this session. Just around the funding area, Jose Maria. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roland. The panelists here have been wonderful. And information so far has been amazing. So as a Proptech founder, it's always, like Precious mentioned, you usually just start off bootstrapping the whole thing and trying to see how it works from your own end. But at some point, you would need some additional help, additional capital that would come to your business, that would help you to sort of scale things to the next level, get to the next customer, meet the next milestone. And it's always a very difficult challenge, especially in the PropTech space, because a lot of people, especially in the ecosystem, the VC space here in Africa, are still trying to understand how this works, are still trying to understand exactly how exactly is this going to scale to the best of their knowledge. However, this year has proven to be an exceptional year because a lot of capital has been coming from outside, Africa into PropTech startups in Africa as well. So I just wanted to, get your opinions about how it has been to actually get the funding for your different startups, how it has also been to actually tell your story to the local VCs here and also to the international VCs. We could just start with Emeka, and Precious can come in.
A very, very good question. And I wish I had a very easy answer for you about raising funding as an African startup. It's a difficult road, no matter what it is you're building on the continent. Talk more of PropTech, which is a really emerging space. But what we are trying to do is essentially show that the only way to solve problems is to show that it's profitable to do so. I don't think the charity solves anything, and we have a housing crisis on the continent. That's very obvious, but it's not going to be solved if we cannot prove that it's profitable to solve it. And once you can prove that it's profitable to solve a problem, you will typically have investors flooding into that space to want to benefit from it. That is the the miracles of capitalism. So that's what essentially we do. We are speaking to investors and we try to explain to them and just show them essentially how big and how huge it will be to solve this problem. And also we've also tried to lean more towards investors who have a demonstrated passion for what we're trying to do, which is to make the world a bit of a better place. So, when we come to them and explain to them that, look, this is what we're trying to do, and this is also what the benefit of it is, we're already kind of on the same page already because they're also trying to do what we're trying to do at the same time. So, for us, it's really just finding the right kinds of investors. Of course, we hope that there will be more access to funding for different types of funding, so non-dilutive capital, for example, so that we can take this capital and then put it into our businesses and help it to grow a bit faster, especially in the early stages. So as a bit of an example, a couple of countries have something called a matching program, where if you raise a certain amount of money, the government will match it. So that is that when companies from those countries go out to raise funding, they would typically have an ace in their pocket, which is that, look, after the entire amazing pitch I've given, also note that if you give me $100,000, my government will also give me $100,000. So your $100,000 investment is worth almost double immediately. That's one thing. Precious, I don't know too much about this, but I know in the UK there's also a program where the government essentially provides tax incentives to people who invest in startups to sort of spur that sector a little bit. So those are the problems that we face on the continent. These things simply don't exist. So it's extremely important that we just focus on investors who sort of have similar visions to what we're doing in the beginning. But I think the biggest issue is honestly that very early stage capital, because that's where it's considered extremely risky. But then that's also where it's needed the most. So we need more people focusing on that sector. So yeah, that's I hope my answer helped you. I'm trying to say that it's a really difficult road, no matter who you are right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was so helpful. Thank you so much. Precious.
I'm only laughing because I think Emeka just literally summed it up. You know, early stage capital is probably the biggest pain and biggest stressful moment for any startup. I'm sure Emeka, your startup is absolutely in that space. So with us at Cutstruct and Live End, absolutely, we're still early stage, and we've had interest. We have interest for sure, and our approach really has been, really telling our story, telling our purpose. What is our vision? What is our mission? And you mentioned something that is absolutely fundamental: demonstrated passion. Because you can have an investor who doesn't actually share the same values and passion to what you're trying to do. Not every investor is the right one, but actually finding investors that have got a shared interest. So what we've been doing really has been understanding what our market is, understanding and engaging with collaborators and potential partners. Because you can have an investor who gives you capital, but you can have also an investor or a collaborator or partner who gives you the resource. So when you're in early stage, it's tough, it's difficult, because you have a vision, you have a purpose, you know exactly where you want to take the organization. But actually, having money in the bank is great to actually fund, but actually having collaborators and partners that can actually take some of that load to support that vision and have that demonstrated passion and partnership is also equally key. So with us, I'll ask really with any VCO partnership or investor is, do you have a shared purpose? Do you understand what it is that we're trying to do? And actually, also, you said, Emeka, is it actually viable? Proving the viability as a startup. I'm sure you have the same issues, We know it's viable. We understand how the end of the game, the end story, but actually convincing investors that this is absolutely required and fundamental to actually drive change. And even worse, if you've actually worked in that space in the industry and actually understand where the nuances are, where you can actually unplug and plug those gaps and barriers. So it's about really positioning your story and positioning your offering to give confidence that it's actually a viable thing. And it is tough. I'm not going to lie, Dr. Roland, it is a tough space. And we're looking for investors that believe in our story and believe in our purpose. And I'm sure there's a large number of Proptech solutions out there that are absolutely viable, but they're struggling because the funding, the support, the investment is very, very limited, particularly at early stage capital. Once you go through that phase and you have something tangible to show, they'll start streaming in. But actually, we need that push. We need that support from government at the beginning to create that MVP for people to then see it go to market. So my call and cry to any government agencies that are looking out there: support us in early stage, because there's a lot of intelligence, there's a lot of ideas that will bring. Sean has got his hand up.
I was looking for the button to raise my hand.
Okay. Sorry, Sean. I think, Sean. Before you go on, right? Sorry to interrupt you. Just I know you're doing the rounds of questions. I think Danielle wanted to ask a question, right? But at this point, what I just want to quickly do.
Let Sean go first for sure. But then I would also like to add some few last comment, because I've been picking a bit of all that has been said, and we have real case studies.
No, sure. I mean, the session is getting very interesting, and I like that. But I just want to mention that one of our panelists for the next session is already on. So Gideon, if you can help, you can bring him on. Tunde from Rent Small. You can bring him on, Gideon, on board. So just to continue, that's just what I wanted to say. I mean, it's getting very interesting and I'm loving it. And so, yes, let's just go ahead. Jose, over to you.
Okay, and Precious, I think you were sort of interrupted when you were talking.
No, it was absolutely fine. This is conversational, isn't it? So I think I've almost said my piece, that there is a cry. There is certainly a cry from Proptech startups and founders that the support is required, because if we actually are going to, we talked about adoption earlier on. How do you adopt something that is actually not in market? So there's a need for that support to happen at early stage. And there's a plethora of innovative solutions that are out there that will change the landscape of property, that will change the landscape of construction, that would allow affordable housing. We're talking about affordable housing earlier on. You know, if you know exactly what you're going to spend, when you're going to spend it, and you can actually allow yourself, I'm now selling our product a little bit, but you can actually have a view of how much your materials cost. Isn't that a better place to be than actually being told a story that you don't actually have the evidence to support that story? Autonomy. Proptech allows autonomy. It allows self-confidence and actually in transparency. So organizations and governments and funding agencies absolutely have a role to play with this, and to allow those multiple ways of accessing finance. Somebody spoke about match funding, tax breaks. Those are really useful tools, simple tools that can actually support startups in the early stages where they really need the funding, where we really need the funding because we're a startup. At this point.
Thank you so much, Precious. I think she just highlighted something really key. It's not just about the capital coming into the startups, but just the opportunities for the startups to get partnerships, opportunities for them to collaborate with existing stakeholders is really, really important. I think Sean wanted to make some comments to what Precious was earlier stating. I don't know if you share your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Jose Maria. Yeah, thanks, Precious. Just your comments on funding. These will be my closing comments. But I think it's such a crucial thing. It's the lifeblood. We speak to the opportunity and the needs, which are very clear. And there's great products coming out, but a lot of those don't get off the ground. Not that all of them will succeed, but we need to. There has to be people taking that risk, and a big thing. I think in Africa, the funding story is good. I think fintech leads the way in a lot of countries, and fintech's often said to be the precursor to proptech. So that's a good thing. Investors are aware of the markets. They're seeing that there's opportunity, and then it's just that education around proptech and what's happening. And there are exciting things happening. Like I said, like Rent Small is one of those proptechs. They got into Techstars, I believe. Really good international accelerator. So those things are happening, but I think it's the community and partnerships to keep building that awareness, speaking to investors, and perhaps more formalized approaches. Of proptechs. Those guys with just an initial idea, to have a forum perhaps, and that's where the associations come in. They really provide such a valuable service. So perhaps there should be special pitch events for people who have a very initial idea. We've been trying to get some pitch events going with some more established proptechs, which is important, but perhaps those ones at the very, very early stages. Because something I've read about is, I think in Africa, we need the domestic investors to be more aware and more excited about proptech. And that's established VCs, and then VCs, and below that, the seed capital. That's something else I read about, is that's really lacking. And I think that usually starts domestically. I'm not a massive funding expert, but I think domestic investors who play in seed funding, etc., or if it's industry partners, government, that seed funding, perhaps 2 out of 10 of these proptechs will be able to make it. That there's the stats that are just the way it is in entrepreneurship and startups. But if we're not giving these a chance, like Precious says, there's going to be a lot of missed opportunities. And also we need to try something different. There's massive challenges in developing markets in Africa, across various things like we've touched on, and we need to try new ways to approach these. The same as REITs sitting with massive office vacancies. They've got to try new ways to do things. So all of us, I think, need to do that. And I mean, that perhaps that seed capital is just a point, and the community again, which has been discussed in partnerships, it can't be overlooked. But thanks. Just fully agree, I think, with what everyone's saying, and it's really been a pleasure to listen to you and to meet you virtually. But yeah, that I'll need to run soon. But thanks again, Roland, and everyone for the opportunity, and all the best for the rest of the session.
Daniel wanted to mention something that he has experienced in his space as well that would give us more insights on what we're also experiencing here. So, Daniel, if you could share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let's say that. Hello? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Let's say that pre-seed and seed funding, as Sean was mentioning now, are constituting 90% of the challenge for a startup to step from a baby status to a grownable with high potential adult. And majority of startups are failing there. At the opening of this panel, I've been saying in Malaysia we have about 350 startups in Proptech and Contech. More than 50% of them are at seed stage. So say the micro solutions. Okay, point one, as I was mentioning, accelerator and sandbox program from the government are giving you a identity card. Investors will listen to you in a bit different way compared to you going and doing the classic friend, family, and relative funding process. All right, you can step up and do at the next level, which in Malaysia is very efficiently covered by angel investors. We have a few huge angel investors associations. Government has been recognizing them. Government has been even creating tax packages for angel investors in a very, very good way. You invest up to a certain limit of money and you can deduct starting from the third year onward. On top, angel investors are also connecting startups with kind of private but decently sized investors, which on the go of the startup are coming in and saying, okay, I'm very interested in your solution. I want to become a shareholder, investing by equity, or I just organize a business loan for you to come to the next stage of growth. A big help, which has been working really, literally, in a fantastic way in Malaysia. So between the three agencies that we have here, and I'm willing to give you information and more data about it. These three information have been babysitting, I would say probably 60 to 70% of the Malaysian startups. And when I say startups, I include fintech, edutech, agritech, healthtech, tourism tech, proptech, contech, and more. Now there is the big thing happening in this period is the drone technology. All right, and use of drone technology. And again, those are agencies from the government are at the front line, helping, supporting, not only with mentoring and accelerators, but also with connection to the right group or the right channel for investment. Besides that, the government is the one offering the very first help. So that is very good. Difficulties that we have here in Malaysia are two different types. One is a extremely old law system. Laws are not yet in favor of startups and digital transformation. All right. I am a data scientist and I fight every other day with government agency, statistics department, and so on to get information. Besides that, a lot of laws have been not updated to the modern situation, to our modern times, meaning in Malaysia, we have Proptech solutions, which are supporting the work of real estate agencies. But a real estate agent in Malaysia, which is covered by a license, fight against the Proptech because he's afraid that Proptech comes in and takes away his job, which is not. We are an infrastructure. We are offering a tool. And the same goes for valuers, the same goes for surveyor, quantity surveyors, architects, building managers, and whatever else. They are getting Proptech as a treat instead of looking at it as a acceleration of their digital transformation, basically. So laws from the government and a bit of hostile, lightly hostile sentiment of institutional bodies and associations, those are the two big challenges that we have here. Investment-wise, another very important thing that we are start doing now as association, and the government is helping through these agencies, is educating the investors. Because one thing is investing in a stock market, one thing is investing in gold, one thing is investing in a property, and one totally different thing is investing in a startup. We know it's a totally different ballgame. They don't. And they don't know in which time frame they should be looking at, what model of investment should they be using to come in. So there is a huge work of ground education to be done on the investors. In these angel investor association are helping enormously, because the first thing that they do, they teach to their members how to be an angel investor and what does carry in terms of analysis, studies, scalability, and all this. So these are the things, and I couldn't agree more with you, Dr. Roland. This is a topic that can be discussed and compared and learned from each other till probably tomorrow morning. Something very passionate. I would also like to talk a bit more about affordable housing and how Proptech has been helping, but we are already badly overshooting on the time given. So I return the voice back to you, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jose Maria, for those insightful questions, and thank you very much, Dr. Danielle. It is very interesting, how our conversation has gone this morning, and I tell you, it also just shows how Proptech is beginning to impact different regions. We see certain things around governments and regulation the same across the region, and we see how they have evolved. But yes, I'm just going to now quickly move over to Tunde. Tunde is the founder and CEO for Rent Small. A lot has been said before you joined us, how you joined the Techstars Accelerator and all of that. So Tunde, I'm happy to have you here. And we're going to take off and hear your views around the adoption of Proptech. And like I always say, it's okay if you use your use case and your product to talk about that adoption. But generally, this morning we have talked about adoption. We have talked about government regulations. We have talked about funding, and we have also talked about what kind of support that we'll be looking at. So quickly, in your own experience, I want you to just share with all our participants, how that journey of adoption has been, and what you have also seen in other clients.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Roland, for having me here today. It's great listening to all the other panelists and some of the things they've shared. I think we are in a very exciting time, I would say, just because we've seen the role of technology in many other industries, and the conversation, there's a lot of conversation around the use of technology in real estate now, which is why we call it Proptech. Of course, there are different angles or segments of that. We have the construction bits, but everything still falls under the umbrella of the real estate technology or property technology. So Rent small. I mean, the part of where the excitement is coming for us at Rent Small right now is just unraveling and seeing where we can go with technology. We started from just saying, okay, we want to change the rental market in Nigeria. People should be able to pay their rents monthly. And that's why we are called Rent Small. The small connotes paying installments or paying in bits, right? So that was where we started from. And we've covered a lot of ground with that. When we compare how it used to be, or how people used to rent, it's very traditional. Even when you have the open listing sites, I mean, there are some that are very well known and they operate not just only in Nigeria. When you have those open listing sites, it's just they are limited to just people seeing the apartment on the site. But after the scene and engaging the agent that listed the unit, everything happens. Everything is done traditionally. You fill the agency form to inspect the property. You fill the KYC form, so that they get to know you. You pay in a very traditional way. But when we introduce technology to rent, even from the basic of, okay, people should be able to find something up until when they are making payments, everything driven by technology and happening on the platform, to their verification, to their due diligence, all of that on the platform. And that's what we introduced with Rent Small. But the exciting part of it, like I mentioned, is just now unraveling and seeing where you can go with technology. Technology is a means to an end. That I think we must always remember that technology itself is not the solution. It's actually just a tool to facilitate the solution and expand the solution. So part of the things that we've unraveled at Rent Small is even the just seeing how we can use technology to drive experience. For our tenants who are renting from us, they are building a credit history. Because we all know that the credit history or credit score rating thing in a lot of African countries they are nothing to write home about, right? Part of the experience or things that I see these days are people that move to other countries. Like I know people that move to Canada, right? And they pretty much have to start from scratch because there's nothing really to show their credit history in where they are coming from, right? Especially when they're coming from Africa, right? So we are seeing, how because we are well positioned, we have a lot of data, we are tracking a lot of things. There's a way we can use technology to even bring about a change in that whole experience of you having a credit. So like I can go on and on how we've used technology to unravel or unlocking different values in the real estate markets in Nigeria. Another one is like people love. A lot of people want to invest in real estate. A lot of people want to invest in that is a fact, right? But sometimes people really don't know how to enter, when to enter, and and what kind of investment should they be looking at. And when I say come into real estate now, I'm speaking from the investment angle. Where you are in real estate is an investment, whether you are buying it to live in it or you are renting it out, right? It's actually the highest asset class in the world. So I'm talking about the people that are investing to rent out, to not to live in. So there are a lot of questions or a lot of decisions these people need to make around the investment they want to do, right? So, and there are not so many data to guide them. So what we've also done is, because we have a lot of data, we're doing a lot of just checking what's the market saying, even in the rental space with our data, and we're now using technology to help people make informed decisions to guide, okay, where should you buy? What will be your return? Not just now, but over a period of 10, even 20 years, right? Because data allow you to, pretty much speak into the future. And you can't get data, you can't get quality data or rich data without using technology to drive it. You are limited when you are not using technology, right? And I feel like that is one of the barriers that we've over the years, that has hampered the growth of Africa, because a lot of things that are done were done in a very traditional way. You still go to government agencies or offices in Nigeria, and you still see that they are pretty much a lot of the data they are using or how they are doing their business is still very manual and traditional. They are collecting data in papers, so they can't make informed decisions. They don't know where growth is happening. They don't know what is really going on, right? So technology has a huge role to play in bringing about, helping the real estate sector in not just in Nigeria but all over Africa to compete. I mean, maybe not compete, but to be more appealing and to have a bigger voice in the global market. I've lived in Asia, as you know, Doctor. I lived in Asia for 5 years, Thailand, and I was able to travel across Asia, and I saw. I mean, I've been to Malaysia. We had someone who was with us just not too long ago, who is based in Asia, Malaysia, and I've seen how things has evolved in these countries, with the impact of technology and so many other factors. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Today, I'm going to come back to you. I know you've touched on a lot of points. I'm going to come back to you, but before Emeka runs off, I just have one round of questions for him. So, Emeka, this is around how your product has been received and how adoption has happened with your product. Before you leave on, I just want you to, what the experience has been and what you have seen and where you think, how you think this adoption rate is going to be going. Again, using the co-funding use case.
Yeah, sure. I mean, adoption maps are extremely interesting. We are primarily doing projects in Ghana right now, but we do have a project launching in Nigeria very soon, a very interesting project. So speaking to the projects we have in Ghana, we've seen a huge chunk of the customers come from Africans in the diaspora, Ghanaians specifically in the diaspora. And for them, yes, there's the profit-making motive, but for many of them, it's really just, sounds very interesting. I've seen crowdfunding work where I currently live. I'm excited to be part of something like that back home. And, it's been a very interesting adoption map, like I have to say. And we've also got a lot of people who've come to us and been like, oh, look, I just want to be involved in the project so that when the construction is complete, I can, be one of the first to buy it, because we, only focus on financing units that are middle income housing. So for us, we've seen very, very enthusiastic audiences, but it's still that, layer of trying to build trust with customers and trying to explain to them that, look, crowdfunding is not a new concept. It's something that you have already been doing. And one thing we do is we have an education platform called Real Sites. So it's just realsites.schoolfundy.com, where anybody who's interested in sort of getting to know real estate investing from scratch can sort of sign up, and we send you, interesting content every single week. You're trying to make the process of learning how to do real estate investing extremely easy. So we do have a lot of people coming in from the education side, where they read 1, 2, 3, 4 articles, and then they're like, okay, you know what? I'm ready to sort of get my feet wet a little bit and see what it's like in there. So just as a bit of a summary, I would say that adoption is, more of Africans in the diaspora and a lot of people local, but we do see that there's that need for trust, and that's why I mentioned the regulation in the regulatory side of it. The assumption is that companies don't like regulation. That's not true. When it comes to investment, we do want regulation, because when there's regulation, everybody knows what they're doing, and we can sort of weed out the bad players who give everybody else a bad name. So I think when that happens, we'll see a lot more massive adoption. But it's a bit of an interesting thing where there needs to be education in the market for more adoption.
Okay, let me just push that forward a bit in terms of regulation when you talk about, and again, looking at what you do in terms of crowd. So today in Ghana, is there a crowdfunding regulation already? In Nigeria, the SEC has released the crowdfunding regulation, and a lot of the Proptech startups are being encouraged to come under that regulation. So in Ghana, do you already have a crowdfunding regulation? If not, how are you now currently being regulated for the kind of product that you're doing, and for all other persons or startups who are looking at real estate investments?
Yeah, so there are crowdfunding regulations. They were ready a few months ago. They are currently going through their adoption stage. The point where the industry. So how I think the SEC in Nigeria did the same thing, where when they came up with the regulations, they put it out to the market and said, okay, you guys critique it, give us feedback so that we can know what exactly goes and what doesn't go. And I think that's currently where the market is currently going. So we have been extremely careful to try not to do activities outside our ambits. And for people who are trying to get into that space, it's good because right now you have a certain allowance, I would say, where there's regulation. So I would say that the barrier to entry for you is actually a bit lower than it was for us who joined when the regulations were not very clear. So yeah, there are regulations in Ghana right now. It's currently going through some critiquing, but from what we understand, we expect them to go into play latest by February next year.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Emeka. I mean, you've been with us from the start. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate. It's okay if you want to jump over. If you still have some time, you can hang on with us. Thank you so much. So I'll jump over to Dr. Daniel, right? So Dr. Daniel, there's been, I think why you were not seeing your face, I'm sure you were back, and today I'd mentioned very some certain things about the Malaysian market because he also has experiences in the Southeast Asia region. Now, where I'm coming back to you, Dr. Daniel, is in the area. I know you've talked about government creating sandboxes. You've talked about government creating accelerator programs and even government funding. The question is, how did the Proptech startups, get government to do this? Or it was just an interest of government looking at the market, seeing the potential, and then government started to do this by themselves. How has that journey been? Because we think, again, just like Sean had mentioned when we were in the call, we need local solutions in the African region to be able to boost and push Proptech. But inspiration, it would be nice to get some sort of inspiration on what has happened in Southeast Asia, or specifically the Malaysian market, on that journey that now sees that active role in ensuring, that Proptech not just survive but thrive, and begin to make impact in the market. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very interesting question, Dr. Roland. What happened in Malaysia? Malaysia was quite lucky in having a visionary leader back several years ago who designed a digital economy and transformation plan for Malaysia. We have been start seeing at the end of the 90s a city being called a cyber giant because of cyber product and cyber infrastructure being established, being constructed right outside Kuala Lumpur. So this has been pushing the country in a certain direction, and tech startup at large, not only Proptech, have been start coming up and going back to the government saying, hey, you do this beautiful plan, you need to support us. So there has been a dialogue. There has been a first agency established, if I'm not wrong, was 1998 or 1999, called MDEC, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, which slowly start graduating the very first kind of ICT direction, because at that time was not yet app, was not yet startup, was not yet angel investor, crowdfunding, and all this was not there. But at that time, there was the very first ICT companies, right? And from there, the thing has been start rolling and developing further till when, again, the government has been start massively opening end of the last decade in 2027 to 29, 2007 to 2009, a number of agencies designed with the scope to support the growth of digital transformation. And that has been a good change. And the unbelievable things that I have to recognize to the Malaysian government, the people, the government servants that are driving these agencies are such passionate people who really put love in everything they are doing. We have signed a number as association. We have a number of MOU signed with these agencies in terms of cooperation, partnership, sponsorship, and so on. And back 2 days ago, we were having an event after dinner time at 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. onward. And there were 3 people out of these agencies attending the event, out of their normal working time. You know what I mean, right? It's a totally different approach. So that has been making a huge, huge difference. Then, if you allow me one more between bracket thought on the expansion and further growth of Proptech. In the last 2-3 years, I've been becoming a Malaysian Proptech Association was established in 2017, becoming a member in 2018, deputy president for 2 years. Now I am the president. And in all these past years, I've been attending countless seminar, congress, roundtable workshop, masterclass as a delegate, participant, panelist, moderator, keynote speaker, and more. We are all making one very big mistake. I've been telling even recently to all my members, I said, guys, we need to stop talking to a PropTech public. Enough. I don't need to share my, of course, on stage have to be PropTech players. But who is our audience? Who are our delegates? Cannot be only PropTech startups. Otherwise, it's a closed circle. We will never grow. We want clients. We are all in the business of making money. So if we want to achieve that, we need to address a public where, for Tunde solution, for instance, could be investor, tenant, landlord. And for what was the name of Emeka? Emeka should be investor, should be startups, should be this type of public, a public which is interested in what we are saying because he is presenting a solution to their problem. And if you look into, again, the past big event in PropTech, none of them have been addressing that type of public. So this is one of the big changes that we are, as Malaysian PropTech Association, we are organizing this summit, 26th and 27th of November. I've been sending to you via WhatsApp some information. Please feel free to spread. It's a free summit. We are keeping it as open as possible to all PropTech and non-PropTech possibly players around the world. Come and check and see what is happening in Asia. It will be quite interesting, and it will be a good platform to exchange ideas and to grow together at the end. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Danielle. I mean, this is almost 2 hours since you've joined us. I'm very, very grateful. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned and take back. Yeah, we're going to share the your November events among our PropTech community, and be sure that a few people will sign. I think there's a lot to be learned in that regard. So we're still on. We're on for another hour or so. So if you want to just stay back with us, you can. And if you want to jump in at any point, you can, Dr. Gambero. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately,
I'll move
I have
over
another
to Jose
meeting.
Maria. I know Jose Maria. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I'll move over to Jose Maria. I know that Jose Maria is very interested in the funding part of things when it comes to PropTech startup. So Jose Maria, I'm going to leave you to, take on the interactions and the conversation with Tunde customer use case, adoption, and all that area. All right, over to you, Jose Maria.
Thanks so much, Doctor. Um, so today, I think we can agree that investments in proper technology startups has always been a major issue for the ecosystem, especially in Africa. I just wanted to pick your brain on the aspect of funding in your own experience. How has it been, and how has it been crucial for you to tell your story, especially to either local investors here or investors, like the Techstars? How has it? What was the compelling aspects in your story that made them say, okay, this is something that we should actually key into? And what has been the journey so far, essentially?
All right, thank you, Jose Maria, for the question. So, I mean, yeah, I think for any business that want to thrive, one of the critical elements you have to, pay attention to, or you have to really ensure that you are not lacking in is funding. And when you are now doing the business and you are riding on technology, it also means that scale your opportunity to scale the business is there, and but also technology. The business itself cannot just rely on technology. The technology and the business now needs funding. So I think those are two aspects that you really have to focus on when it comes to funding the business in terms of operation, in terms of delivering the service or whatever the business are set out to do, and technology in terms of making sure that you have a solid, you have a good infrastructure that your technology is built on. You can innovate with your technology. You can have more hands-on to roll things out with technology. And for us, that is really the way we started. I mean, we didn't start cheap. That I must say that. I mean, just to put a bit of background or story to it, when we launched Rents Once More, we got a CTO to join the team, and gave him, we need to build a mobile app, right? And we set the goals and what needs to happen within a space of time. We signed an agreement. He actually came up, part of what was on the table for him was also to become a co-founder. Should they have this initial set of goals, which I think was a period of 3 months, he was able to deliver and achieve those goals, right? And because I'm not a technical co-founder or founder, as the case may be, my other co-founder happens to have an extensive background in technology. But at that point, he has his hands full. He had about 2 other companies that he was leading, and he wasn't even the one in charge of the technology of those companies. I mean, those were really successful companies that he had built and had the technology. So with this guy, I mean, the app was built, but the sad part of it is that it really never, it wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. Pretty much, there was a lot of malfunctioning and all of that. So we knew that if we were to rebuild this, this app, or to build a new mobile app, we're just going to be wasting a lot of time, because we want to go to market as quickly as possible. So we have to outsource the initial phase of building our web platform. We outsourced it, outside of the country. Funny enough, or sad enough, and it cost us so much money. But we did all of this bootstrapping. Now to the business side of things, right? For the first 1 year, we were bootstrapping, like myself and my co-founder. I mean, I remember selling my gen, my 17 kVA gen, in my house at one point to pay salary for a particular month. And I mean, there are so many stories around that, but the business needs to stay alive and it needs to continue moving. So after the first year of bootstrapping, we entered a new phase of we now have some traction, some adoption, and we wanted to launch officially, We had some angel investors who were more like advisors to us, and we engaged them, and they were willing to give us some funds, to as an angel investor, right? So we got about 2 of such, and that allowed us to also take care of things for a few months. I would say few months, right? But I think with Rent Small Small, what we just did was the way we structured the model of the business from scratch is to ensure that we don't get to a place where we are completely cash trapped. I think every business should always look out for how do I ensure you have your runway period. I think part of that is also having a good financial management structure within the company where what your runway is. If I have $100,000, where and what am I putting the $100,000 is, and what is my runway period? Do I have just 3 months? Do I have 5 months? Do I have 6 months? And that will allow you to plan. I think it would be dangerous for a technology-driven business or any kind of business to allow things to leave things till last minute. So when you do that, then your chances of survival or having your head over the water or above the water, you reduced it significantly, and you might not survive it. So you might literally just go under the water if you leave things to the last minute. So just generally speaking, when it comes to funding, I think the focus should be how to ensure that the business is growing. Use everything you have to ensure that the business has traction and the business is covering grounds, right? Immediately you're able to do that. It doesn't mean that you are going to attract all the big millions immediately, but you start seeing doors opening. You might initially attract maybe $10,000 or $20,000, and you should be open to those funding as well. Don't say, start small, like Rent Small Small, right? Start small. Don't say, I want $1 million. It's good to have the ambition to want to get $1 million, but what do you have to do to actually convince an investor to say, give me $1 million, right? The conversation to get $1 million will probably take you longer time or demand. I'll tell you, everybody that has raised funds in any industry, they will tell you that funding is a job in itself. Raising fund is a job in itself. A lot of founders, when they are going through their fundraising, they literally don't do anything else during that period. If it is a 3 months goal or 2 months goal, that is what they focus their energy on. And maybe the other co-founders can be running the day-to-day operation of the business and all that. So when you're having a conversation of $1 million raise, then you know that if you have a lot more questions that are going to be asked, you have to put more on the table and all that. So it's a question of, do you have all of that today? If you don't have all of that today, then don't start small. A $10,000, a $20,000. Use the growth, the adoption. No matter how small they are, it's something. Don't belittle them. Don't ignore them. Don't discount them. They are, even if it is 10 users that you have, it's proof of concept or proof of adoption that there are people that are interested in what I'm doing. It's now a question of how can we make it grow. That is what a $10,000 would answer for you, or a $20,000 will answer for you. I have 10 people that have already adopted what I'm doing. With $10,000, I can grow from 10 to 100 people, 100 adoption, right? And then from there, you begin to have more doors. So we told ourselves, just to end on this note, when we were founded in 2017, we launched officially in 2018. When we launched in 2018, official launch, we applied for Techstars and we really didn't get, into the program, right? And at that point, I told myself, you know what, I'm not going to spend too much energy, in this applying for this accelerator program and all of that. They are good, but I'd rather spend my energy growing the company, growing the business, using all the resources at my disposal to grow the business to the point that if it's either if I'm applying for a Techstars again, they know that if we don't accept this guy, we're about to miss out on something. Either that, or secondly, they're even the one reaching out to me. And it's a bit, the way we got into text, that it's a bit of both. We were referred, all our numbers were shared, and then the conversation, started from there, and then we now have to now go through the official process of applying. So it's actually it was a turnaround, process, because now we have a good number, good traction. The company's revenue is coming in and all that. So the funding process, you need to be very, very careful so that you don't get overwhelmed, or you don't get it doesn't now become about funding.
Very insightful. I wanted to just touch on the adoption side of things, especially from the customer side. How has that been for Rent Small Small over the years, in terms of how you can grow your users, how you were able to convince them that this was the right option for them, or the right product for them? How has that journey been so far?
Okay, good. So adoption is on two sides for us, right? We have the adoption on tenant side, and we have adoption on landlord side, right? The tenant adoption, I think it's not rocket science. There are reports out there, and there's a survey that says that 88% of people renting in Nigeria will rather pay monthly, over yearly, right? So there are so many problems. The monthly payments system or Rent Small Small solution is solving for tenants, right? One, they don't have to now look for loan to pay their rent. They can pay their rent as they earn, right? You earn monthly, you pay monthly. And what that also does for you is it brings about financial balance for you. They are saying, I've read, sayings that, when you are paying monthly, it puts you, it makes you very, it puts you on the edge, that you're not settled. You're always you're always in a state of worry that, my next rent is due, and all of that. But my response is that, so when you pay upfront, you're only buying time. You're only buying peace. The kind of stress and unease that come on you when you are paying yearly and your rent is almost due, it outweighs all the peace that you've enjoyed. Let's say your rent is 12 months, or you're renting 1 year, right? And you've paid it upfront, and you've had 9 months to enjoy some level of peace of not thinking about the rent. And you know that in 2 months' time, the rent is due, right? One, you haven't even finished paying the loan that you used to take to take the property. Two, you don't have the bulk money, because now we're talking about bulk money that you need to pay all at once, right? And you know that when you don't have that bulk money, your chances of being evicted or being thrown out is higher. Because the truth is that the landlord is also banking on that money. He has already made plans around that money, that pay school fees and all of that, right? So by the time you are in 9-10 months and you already know that you don't have any means to, you haven't saved up for the next rent, you realize that you start having sleepless nights. Unlike when you can actually, how much you're earning monthly, that this is how much you should be paying as rent. So the other thing also that the yearly rent, it does, the other negative, it puts a lot of people in a bubble. They are blindsided, in so many ways. And one of the ways that when people are renting yearly, they don't really accord their income to their rent. They don't really, there's no planning or budgeting around it. So it's usually an emotional decision of, I like the space, it's comfortable, I like the location, so let me get it. You don't sit down and say, how much am I earning monthly? What does that come to in 12 months? Can I afford to, if my total income in 12 months is $10,000, right? Can I afford to get a property that is $15,000, or even $8,000, right? If you are getting a property that is $8,000 annually and your net income annually is $10,000, then you are paying 80% of your income as rent. But a lot of people actually don't sit down to do that calculation. They just they inspect the property, they feel good about it. They look, can I get money can I get a loan to pay for it? Or how much have I saved so that I can pay for it? They don't. But the monthly payment actually brings about that balance. You don't need to sit down and do calculation. Everybody knows how much their salary is monthly. And you know also with rent once more that if you are getting a property, it's spelled out, black and white, and there's no other fees. We don't have any. It's almost going to a supermarket. The price is labeled on the product already. If it is $1,000, it's $1,000. So you can now say, I'm earning $1,000 monthly, and this property is $1,000 monthly. It's definitely, I'll be struggling. So people should not, generally, you should not pay more than 30% of your income as rent. The global standard is about 25%, but because of the country we are in and all of that, we know that the economic factor is different. So maybe 35% if you are stretching it, except you have other means of income that can net, with increased margin. So that is the adoption on the tenant side. The demand is huge. People are seeing the value in it. Some people that are maybe they have this belief that the fact that you're paying monthly, it means that you don't have money. It's not. It's a terrible saying. That is not the case. It just means that you are financially illiterate, or you are financially illiterate. I don't even know how to qualify that. Yeah, you are financially illiterate because you are supposed to pay things as you can afford it or as you earn, not giving the money up front, right? On the adoption on the landlord side, it's also proven to the landlord that this thing can work. And for a lot of them, it's a case of, okay, I'll test. I would give you guys a chance. I will test the water and see if it's working. And the feedback has been that, wow, I actually enjoy collecting my rent monthly now than I was collecting it upfront, because the landlords, they have the situation where they collect all the money upfront, and before you know, everything is gone, and they can't account for what have I spent the money on, So, and rental income is actually globally what is supposed to be is a source of steady income. That is what rental investment is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a means for you to have a cash flow on a monthly basis, right? But in this part of the world, just because we're a cash economy, that has affected or influenced this market, but it should not. There are some things that should not be affected. Shelter is a basic human need. Food is a basic human need. As long as you won't go to market and the person selling groceries will not tell you to pay 1 year in advance for groceries that you are going to be using for food for 1 year, or you're going to go to supermarket and supermarket is not going to ask you to pay 1 year in advance for the groceries you need just to cook food for today to eat, right? Then that demand should not be placed on another basic human need, which is shelter. So for me, I mean, we are glad and we're happy to see how receptive people are, both landlord and tenants, of rent once more. We need to, our bottleneck is still supply. More landlords need to come on board. They need to come on board and experience the small way. And we believe that it's just a matter of time before this becomes a norm or a standard all across Africa. Because there are only a handful of countries in Africa that allow monthly payments, mostly in the southern part of Africa. West Africa, East Africa, all the countries, they are yearly, upfront payment of rent. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Tunde. Very insightful on how the adoption is being looked at from both the landlord side and also from the tenant side. Really great insights. Doctor, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Tunde. Tunde, you're going to stay on. I have a few questions from my end for you. I know that Jose Maria still has 1 or 2 questions for you also, but I want to take the opportunity to bring on to the studio our friend, Mr. Coulomb Ashton from the Proptech Hub in Western Australia. Please, Gideon, if you can help us bring on live Ashton. Oh, okay. Okay. James is also here. Great. Ashton, you're muted. You're muted.
Fix that. How's that? Is that better?
Oh, better. I love. Great, great, great to have you.
G'day, guys. So,
Yeah,
yes,
good.
so I'm from Perth, Western Australia, and I've got it's a bit cheeky. It's in the afternoon here. It's 5 o'clock over here in Perth, Western Australia. So I've got myself a beer, local from Fremantle. And we've just finished the radio show, and we've been talking about property transactions. So thank you very much for having us here. I thank you very much, Dr. Roland, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions and give some insight of what's going on over here.
Oh yeah, that's what we want to do over the next hour. We started about 2 hours ago. We had a total panelist of about 9. It's been exciting. It's been very, very interesting.
Yeah,
and also
I was just watching that for the past half an hour, and and I hope I get your name right, Tunde. I think it's the whole issue of people having to pay up front and not being able to pay as they go. It's a real issue, and government need to get around it. Investors need to get around it, and the community need to be supported.
Oh, great, great, great. And also, before we go into this next 58, 59 minutes or so, let me also quickly make the introduction and jump onto James Desley, who's the co-founder for Unisu. I mean, James and I have come very, I won't say long, but deep, really. I met James about 3 or 4 years ago, right? I think we first brought him to Lagos when we were trying to organize the Proptech community, I think around 2018 or so. Since then, he's been my go-to person when it comes to global Proptech. So James, I'm happy that you're here. And we're just going to continue the session right where we stopped. I think Jose Maria was still asking the question around use cases and funding. So Jose Maria, I'll let you take your questions regarding funding around our 2 panelists, and then I'll jump in from there. So go ahead, Jose Maria.
Well, tell you what, Roland, let me just one quick thing, Jose Maria, just jumping in for a second. I just wanted to say hi.
Hi.
I don't know why I got included. I was just in the background waiting, waiting to come in. It's just as well that I'm decent. But Roland, it was a total surprise to me. But it's great to be here, and thank you for putting this event on. And I'm really pleased that we're able to bring perspectives from all around the world, because the most important thing is being able to apply the knowledge from Africa, the knowledge from Australia, from mainland Europe, so that everybody can understand the situation locally as well as globally. Because the challenges that you have in Nigeria and the wider African subcontinent are very different to the problems that Ash will face in Western Australia. And unless we have that understanding from each other about the challenges that we all face, the real estate industry doesn't move forward. It doesn't evolve, it doesn't adapt, because we work in silos. So the American ecosystem of the property industry thinks that those problems it faces are the problems that everybody faces. And that goes for all developed nations. And we have to understand the problems that we all face, because some of them will be local, but some of them we can share those problems with other people. So it's really important that these sort of conversations come together. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let Jose Maria, you go for it. Roland, it's a great pleasure to be here. I haven't got a beer, Ash.
You should, mate. What time's it over there?
It's like 9 a.m. It's even too early for me, right?
Well, it's 5 o'clock in Western Australia, so you guys can get away with it.
Right. Roland, over to you. Sorry, Jose Maria, over to you. I'm just going to mute myself, and Roland, if you want to remove me and then invite me back in an hour, that's great. I'll just be sitting in the background, okay?
No, that's fine. I mean, this is the final hour. This is the last hour. We'll have 55 minutes to end the So yeah.
All right.
So you can.
I'll leave you guys to.
Okay.
I'll just sit here.
Okay. All right, Jose Maria.
Thank you so much. So I think I'll just sort of buttress on what Tunde was saying. The last thing he mentioned was around the adoption and how he was trying to explain the exact point of how the tenants are adopting the rent small, paying monthly in their different residential properties, and how he was also trying to convince the landlords themselves that this is like an actual way you should collect rent, and it's even much more better for you as a landlord to actually get money on a monthly basis because there is consistent cash flow, and you might even make more money in that sense. So I just wanted to ask Ash, what's your own experience in that kind of flow for adoption in Proptech in your own region? What are the likely things that could accelerate that as well, that we could also learn from here as well? That would be very cool for us.
Yeah. So in Perth, Western Australia, for every tenant, it's called bond. So you pay 4 weeks up front, and it's held in a trust account. And the real estate agency holds that, the landlord doesn't. And then you pay 2 weeks up front to the landlord. And that works really well. It's been a thing that's always happened. And the rate that arrears is less than 3%. So people do pay on time. The normal payment is every fortnight. So the tenant will pay on a fortnightly basis for the fortnightly upfront. And then that will be held by the real estate agent, and then they will take their portion, and then it will go to the landlord, the landlord on a monthly basis. So that's sort of how it works over here, and it works out pretty well. That bond, which is 4 weeks, when you have people in the affordable housing or social housing. So affordable housing is a tier higher than social housing, but both of them are considered by the government that they need help. Okay, and if they need help, the government actually pays that 4 weeks bond to the real estate agent, and then the real estate agent holds, and then the tenants don't actually have to pay the bond. And the tenants that aren't paying the landlords is less than 3%. So it is something to work. So when I was hearing Tunde say something like you have to pay 12 months up front, that does not happen here in Western Australia.
It's a very interesting thing. I think what the major thing I got from what you just said now is the government support for providing this, ecosystem to allow these individuals actually pay. And that's one of the major hurdles we're even facing over here, is that most of the startups are actually pioneering this, model in the real estate space, and we sort of require the government to actually step up. So I'm just going to go over to Tunde. What do you think is really important for the government to look at in this space, especially in the monthly rental flow? Because I think we also noticed that recently one of the ministers actually mentioned that is something that we should have in Nigeria as well. So I just wanted to get your take.
Yeah,
on
so
that.
I think your strength and the strength of this group, it really is so strong. And I know it's early days, but coming together and seeing how the rest of the world does it, is you can talk to government and say, look, Australia is quite a wealthy country. It's a small population, but this is how it does things. And over there, it's relatively successful. That's a case study that we can then bring to our government and say, look, it works over in Australia. And it doesn't just work in Australia, it also works in New Zealand, and it also works in this other country, and that's, you're opening up through these channels, and then the government can say, okay, look, this is maybe the proof in the pudding, and maybe we can start to adopt these new policies. But it's going to take you guys to really advocate that, and the government to see what's happening overseas.
Ash, thank you for sharing that how it works in Australia, Western Australia with us. That is the case in many countries, not just in developed countries, but even developing countries all across Asia. I lived in Thailand 5 years. In Thailand is considered a developing country, just maybe a few years ahead of Nigeria in terms of development, right? We realized that I never paid my rent upfront when I lived in Thailand. You only pay 2 months security, which is also 1 month security deposit and the first month rent. So you're at the point of entry, you are paying 2 months, 1 month security, and then the first month rent. So, but in terms of talking to government or engaging government to drive the change, I think it's something that needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast. The reason why I'm a big advocate for this whole change in the rental arrangement or rental process in Nigeria is because, for me, it's so basic, because rental or shelter is a basic human need.
It is.
We tell ourselves or remind ourselves that just as important food is, shelter is also important. There are 4 basic human needs, right? And shelter and food are part of the 4. So if food gets so much attention globally, there's always discussion around food, elevating poverty, elevating starvation and all of that. But there are almost little conversation around elevating access to shelter or inaccess to shelter, and all of this. And I think it needs to change, especially in developing countries or in African countries where this yearly payment of rent is very dominant, right? So part of what we, there was a discussion I had we have few government personnel that have been advocates. So one of the former, we are based in Lagos, which is the largest city in Africa, and the former governor of Lagos, who is currently the Minister of Housing for Nigeria, he's been an advocate for this change. In fact, it used to be 2 years rent upfront in Nigeria, right? Yeah, it used to be, and some landlords still collect the 2 years. That's the truth. But it was
how do people afford to pay 2 years up front?
I mean, it's a landlord market.
It's the way we live. It's the way we live.
It's crazy. It's almost like you need to get a loan just to be able to pay your rent, and then you pay your loan off. It just seems.
I know. It's sad when things that it almost sound insane and impossible, and like you can't wrap your head around it, but you see that has become the norm, and you ask questions like, how did this happen? How did we get here? So he was a major voice and advocate for moving. In fact, he was pushing for monthly, but he was only able to get yearly, to change the law from 2 years to 1 year. And in recent time, there's still some conversation around the monthly payment. So I now jumped on my company, our WhatsApp group, and I just put it there. What role can the government play in changing, in really contributing to the monthly payment of rent and making it the standard? Should it be enforced or should it be encouraged? And the conversation pretty much tilts. It's almost a 50-50. For me, I'm of the opinion that I think one strong way government can drive this is, yes, they can encourage it and they can enforce it. I think both needs to play out. But beyond that, also, they need to incentivize it. So if you are a landlord and you have 3 properties, if the government is not saying like, oh, everybody should pay monthly and that should be the norm, which I think it should be, that should be the case. But even if that is not the case, if you are a landlord and you have 3 properties and you're collecting, you should be limited to just maybe collecting upfront rent on one of the 3 properties, and you are enforced to collect.
Can I ask a quick question? So the government has obviously said that's the bare minimum. So private enterprise, as well as the investors or whoever that is leasing out the stock of housing, can they actually say we're happy to accept 6 months or 3 months? Are they able to do that?
The government or the tenants?
Yeah, the landlords. So the people that own housing, are they actually able to change the rules and offer 6 months or 3 months?
So
I
think
is the government?
Yeah, I think because there needs to be a reorientation of some sort, right? People struggle with change when something this is how they've done it for decades, right? So, and a lot of them have come to believe that this is the best way to do it, because they feel safer collecting the rent upfront. So if you are now bringing a change, it's almost a big barrier to say, why should we change? Even when you know that the change is good or the change has
so what I'll share. So we have the real estate agencies that do it by how the government sets it, which is that 4 weeks bond and then 2 weeks rent. But we also have a private market, and that private market doesn't use a real estate agency group. They actually lease the property to themselves, and you'll find that they'll use different platforms to say, okay, 2 weeks bond, 2 weeks rent, or just pay you 2 weeks rent up front, and they will lease a room or they will lease the house as a whole. And you'll find a lot of people, a lot of investors that maybe have 1, 2, 3, 5 or whatnot properties that manage their housing themselves actually don't follow the 4 weeks bond and the 2 weeks rent. They just want that lower grade market to enter their properties, and they'll just lease out the rooms or the houses to suit how they actually want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. There's so many ways. It's first of all accepting that while if the government is not playing their part in really enforcing and pushing for this, the way we are going about it is also just knowing that yes, we are not going to pay any landlord upfront. The way we set our platform is, should you be a landlord and you're willing to test the water, then we can start from quarterly. Are you open to collecting the rent quarterly? And if the landlord says, okay, yes, I'm open to collecting the rent quarterly, then we list the platform. And it's also the tenant's choice to say that, okay, I can do quarterly or I still want to do monthly. But we don't want we haven't built the platform for yearly rental. We are driving the monthly rental. And we're also being flexible to say if there are landlords that don't jump at the monthly rental immediately, let's give them opportunity to start at least quarterly. And we have a good size of tenants also paying quarterly. We have landlords that they've opened it up, whether the rent come monthly or yearly, I really don't mind. I just want my rent. And we put it on the platform, and we have tenants that say, you know what, I would prefer to pay monthly or I would prefer to pay yearly. But over 90% of our tenants are paying monthly, and just about 2 or 3% are paying yearly, and then the rest, paying either quarterly or biannually. But governments really need to come. They need to start from somewhere. That for me, that is every change. If you are birthing a change, or you want to bring about a change, if you are not going to make it a law, to enforce the change and make people switch immediately, then you need to start from somewhere. And for me, the starting from somewhere means the government needs to incentivize. So if you're saying, like I was giving this the example, if you have 3 properties, you're only allowed to collect upfront rent on 1. The other 2 should be, monthly or quarterly, right? That way, or if you are collecting rent monthly, then you pay personal tax. You are giving a rebate on personal tax. Things like that can encourage, the adoption of the monthly payments of rent?
Yeah. So what you might find is, in your platform where you're changing the status quo of paying annually, and you're now getting tenants to pay monthly. Every time that they do pay monthly, on their profile, the landlord gives them a review of a tick, yet paid or whatnot, and then you're now changing the behavior of your community into a different norm. And whether you do that and that becomes the way that it now happens, and government becomes irrelevant because that's just the behavior of the buying process that you've done, isn't that really the outcome that we want? And then government can come last.
That's
and I think it's awesome that you're doing that, mate. And over here, we've got a few different innovators that are doing similar stuff. So one team put together a social housing marketplace. So in Western Australia, we've got more than 200,000 people that are either living on the streets, living in their cars, or couch surfing. So they're going between different houses of their friends. And what they did is created a marketplace online for them to apply themselves, so profile themselves and saying, look, we need a room to stay in. And then you would have specific landlords that would designate rooms or houses for those people. And it would just be a marketplace that worked. And it works now, and it works really successfully, and their numbers are growing. But also what they did is we had bushfires over here. So we just had everyday people with housing where they couldn't access their homes because of the bushfires. And you would have people that would put up their house and their rooms available for people just specifically for the bushfires that couldn't get to their homes. And then those people would actually go in to that stock on that marketplace online.
That's brilliant. Thanks for sharing that.
Interesting. I mean, yeah. I think the conversation is really, really interesting. I mean, looking at Western Australia, looking at Nigeria, and Ash trying to understand how people pay for 2 years. I mean, like I just mentioned when I interrupted. Yeah, 1 year is the way we live here. I want us to quickly use the next 30 minutes to try and wrap up the conversation. Thanks very much, Jose Maria, for this session. I want to quickly jump on to James. I mean, like I said, James is my go-to person when it comes to global Proptech. And I know that, James, you have seen, experienced, several products, across the region, and looking at what is working, what's not working, what is adoption rate, and all of that. Now, my question to you, basically, is looking at it from the global perspective, right? What should Proptech startups be doing? One, what should the government, because I'm coming to this issue of government again, just looking at the conversation between Tunde and Ashton, around what the support should be. So I'm looking at what should Proptech startups be doing to increase the level of adoption.
I just missed you on that
what
last bit, Roland. What was that last question, Roland? You said what should governments do? I got that. And then there was another one as well.
Yeah. It's about the Proptech startups, the startups. How should they continue to organize themselves such that they are attracting? Because as you know, in the African region, this is just emerging. Okay, we've seen a lot of accelerator programs now looking at Proptech startups in the region and helping to push Proptech. On those two fronts is exactly what I'm looking at for you to share your experience, in terms of what you have seen Proptech in other regions do that we can adopt, and now you have also seen government get into these Proptech communities and help just boost what they're doing.
Okay. So firstly, I mean, again, thank you for having me on, Roland. It's great to come back and have a chat with you, even in this digital realm. I much preferred it in Lagos, but even digitally is a nice thing to do. So let's address the first question. You know, what should they do? What should a Proptech startup do at the moment? That really depends on where you are in the world, in my view, Roland. If you're a Proptech startup, and I'm seeing this, by the way, around the world, there's a big difference between a startup business, a scale-up business, and an established business. What I'm seeing in the more developed markets is a much greater slowdown in terms of the number of businesses that are starting. And I expect that to continue to slow down. Possibly the pandemic might have created a new excuse for creating a business with a new business model. And I think if I was in a developed nation now, I would be trying to understand the impact of two things. Number one, what the pandemic has done for our market. And number two, quite importantly, what sustainability and ESG is doing for our market. Because that's where new opportunities are. And just quickly, let's just see if I can show you this. Yeah, I can. So I'm going to show what I mean by the market slowing down in terms of innovation. So I think I can share.
Yes, you can. Yes, you
screen
can.
Here. Can you tell me if you can see this a data table?
Okay.
Can you see some data in front of you?
I can't, mate.
Not yet. Not yet. Gideon, you might want to help us.
Here we
Okay,
go.
it's coming up. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, great.
Alrighty.
It's coming up. Yeah.
What I want to talk to you about is this whole, looking at the data and what does the data tell us about the market. So, currently there's 9,500 companies, of which about 10% of them are now inactive in the global market. The interesting thing when I talk about this whole developed versus developing nations, you look at the year that these Proptech businesses are forming, there's been a steep drop-off in the last 2 years. Now, it's my view that if you are an entrepreneur in a developed nation, 2022 is going to give you a really interesting opportunity to build around those two topics of what has the pandemic done to the industry and what is climate change going to do. And bear in mind that we are currently have just finished COP26 in Scotland. And a lot of world leaders have decided that they're going to cease deforestation. And a lot of the nations have pledged to have sustainability targets in their large corporations, which means that corporations benefit and this is a UK-centric thing, but I do expect it to happen outside of this. Top executives of large companies are now going to be targeted in terms of their incentive packages will be tied to their sustainability objectives and whether they hit them. Now, what that means, bear in mind that the property portfolios of all of these organizations that we have around the world are probably amongst the largest contributors to their ESG commitments. Expect there to be real opportunities, especially to create new businesses in developed countries, but equally so in more developing countries. So I would expect next year, we're at 22 businesses have started this year. I expect that number to really increase quite dramatically next year. So let me just come off of that screen share for a second. So that's the first thing I would say about the whole developed nations. Expect there to be a push. If I was in a more developing market, and when I mean a developing market, I mean a market where there's a large real estate community and a slightly smaller Proptech community. And obviously, Roland, Africa is one of those. I think at the moment we're tracking just under 100 companies in Africa, and that includes South Africa and Nigeria, who are the two largest countries in there. And really, I put Africa and South America as two of the most exciting developing nations that we have, or developing continents that we have. I would love to be an entrepreneur at this moment in those countries. Absolutely love to be, for two reasons. Number one, if I'm going to start up a business, or if I've perhaps got a scaling up business. If I was a startup founder, I would be looking at the more developed nations and trying to look at models and businesses that have succeeded or are gaining traction and become a fast follower. I would effectively copy a business model and make it relevant to my local market. Number one, you've got proof that a business model can work, which also gives reassurance when it comes to funding. You've got a proven market that will grow, and you can also prove to investors that will back your idea that it has worked in Germany. And I've adapted it for my market here, because when I talk about scaling of businesses globally, I talk about three challenges that a startup founder will have, which is that of language, liberties, and legislation, the 3 Ls. So a startup founder, if they're looking at a German business that has really scaled very well in Germany and said, I can adapt that to Uganda or Ghana, they just need to address those three things. How do I address the language issue? How do I address the liberties? And that's the personal liberties of the people using the app. And how do I address the legislative issues of that particular technology model? If you do that and you get that right, you're in a really exciting space, because in those emerging economies and developing technology hubs, you've got scale because you've got a considerable real estate industry. And that for me is really exciting. If you're a scale-up Proptech business in Nigeria, to take that as the example, again, I think it's a really exciting time, because you've now started to get, and I hope I've helped a little bit with this, but you've now got some of the large VC funds starting to look at the likes of South America. They're starting to look at Nigeria as a classic example and saying, well, we're going to get the value in these companies because the valuations of businesses in America or mainland Europe are just too high. There's too much competition and it's pushing valuations up higher. And actually, maybe there's value elsewhere. And if you've got a proven business model in, let's say, Lagos, where the market is gigantic and yet there's no competition for it, and yet there's a considerable real estate market, for me, the VC space to accelerate your business growth is considerable. And almost you've got a business that you don't need to scale outside of Nigeria because the market's so big. So for me, there's the opportunities, I think, from a startup founder perspective and a scale-up founder perspective. Market is critical, fast follower, copy business models, and really grow domestically. Scale up, we know the investment market is really hot in these emerging markets. And so, to use the phrase of make hay while the sun shines, there's a really interesting market in there. So that's what I would do if I was a Proptech business. Does that all make sense? Does that sound sensible?
So are you moving to Africa or something, mate?
Roland wouldn't let me in. I wouldn't be
allowed. So we're just going to copy the best 10,
okay.
Over, and we're going to have some fun for a couple of years.
Absolutely, 100%.
So James, I think the point you've raised also gets into the area where that Jose Maria has also spoken about with all our panelists, which is in the area of funding. I mean, my takeaway from here is if you're a fast follower and you can look at business models that have worked elsewhere that is properly adapted to local market, chances are you have a lot of VCs looking at funding those ideas, which I think is something that is it's a good takeaway. On the other side, so I think the other part of the question is government.
Yeah.
Okay. What have you seen with government in other climes, whether in developed countries or in developing countries or emerging countries, and what should Proptech associations, because we've spoken to a few Proptech associations in this panel session, rather in this masterclass, and now we should go about just trying to get government in. Okay, so that would be the other part of the question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the government one is an interesting question because it's so localized, and if I can say, Roland, as well, depending on the country that you're in, it may not be the government; it may be the state. Ash, I'm sure that's the same, with you in Australia, and it's almost a state federal issue as much as it is a national government issue. Is that fair, Ash, in Oz, just as an example?
It is.
Yeah. So, and that's especially the case in America, for example, where innovation is dealt with quite on a federal level. So I want to have that as a caveat at the start. But there are really interesting initiatives I've seen all around the world. I'll start with the United Kingdom. We are supposedly quite digitally savvy, but even so, this isn't about fintech or proptech or construction tech. This is about digital transformation. Everything we're talking about here is digital transformation of, in particular, industries within a certain country. So the first thing that a government needs to do is engage, listen, and understand. Those three things are absolutely pivotal to the next steps that they have to make. And they also have to be very open.
And you'll find that government will normally engage, listen, and maybe not do the last one.
Yeah.
Understand. But they are getting there. I think the more time that you keep showing them case studies and case studies and case studies, they start to get it.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting things that we're starting to see. I mean, the British government, for example, has been quite behind blockchain-based systems when it comes to a land registry. And I find that quite interesting because I think the blockchain is still a long, long, long way off, and yet the British government is quite advanced in it. And part of that is because every government has a pain point. The pain point for us as a local UK-based government is we have the land registry system in the UK, which is a centralized and a trusted institution, which has always been there. But there is a massive risk there in terms of it being broken into, hacked, burnt down, whatever it is, and they're seeking alternatives. So there is a reason for the government to get involved. But other things are painstakingly slow, and that is things like planning. Planning is a nightmare in the United Kingdom, and it will continue to be a nightmare because of historic challenges. So yeah, engage, listen, understand, and be open is the last one. They have to be open to the changes. But then there's the next step, which is, forgive me, Ash, they've started to understand. Now what do they do? And that's when they have to start employing people that are industry communicators. I've seen a couple of governments where they now have, for our sector, Proptech executives. And their job is...
That has not happened in Australia. That is amazing.
Australia is about 5 years, for example, behind the UK. Yep. We appointed our Proptech lead about 3 years ago. And it's, she's on her own, but she was appointed by the digital transformation team to look at the property sector. And it's so all-consuming, all she's focused on is planning. But it's about a direction of travel. The government has to appoint somebody that connects the government departments with the local technology and innovators which are on the ground. Then you've got other opportunities, and every government, again, is doing it differently. So I was on a conference in Dubai. The Dubai government is a fascinating case study when it comes to governmental intervention, because the government, in their case, being relatively state-run, are the water companies and the electricity companies, they're run by the government. They're not privatized in any way. So they've done some, and I'm going to use the classic British phrase of interesting. They've done some interesting initiatives, which is they have innovation hubs, which are innovation around water, innovation around electricity, innovation around the core services that get delivered into the buildings. And they are really quite fascinating. You know, these are innovation hubs that are there to support and enhance the technology ecosystem to make changes to the core resources that the UAE are delivering into buildings. The slight criticism and hesitancy that you've got there is that the Dubai government controls everything. And therefore, there's a lot of resistance about, well, why should we go and innovate? Because everything is run by the government. We're not going to be able to make this a mind-breaking invention. So there's a lot of interesting things there that the government has. But for me, there's a 3-step process, which is engage, that whole learning piece, engage, listen, understand, and be open. The second bit is you need to appoint industry experts that can bridge the gap between government and the industry, and that's both the technology and the property industry. And the third bit is start looking at really encouraging and incentivizing the entrepreneurs to develop systems with the government support. Because remember, the government owns a lot of data sets, and it does come back to data. Be open with the data sets that the government holds, and bring an innovation hub around different data points that we can create quite interesting innovation. So those are the 3 things I would be recommending any government at the moment.
And it would be great if we could get those 3 things in somewhat of a blueprint, and backed off and signed by all of our Proptech associations, and then we can hand that to the governments in our jurisdictions and say, look, this is what the world thinks governments need to do, and whoever acts on it first is going to do well, and whoever lags is going to be chasing.
Well, I think that's a very different and slightly difficult initiative globally, Ash, only because, and let's just put some context to the viewers here, there are obviously organizations and associations on the property side and the technology side all around the world, but all of those organizations have got different value propositions to their members, have got different legislative structures that are and governance structures which are built around them. Some of them are for profit, some of them are not for profit, and as a consequence, especially I think the not for profits, and having set up the first helped set up the first UK Proptech Association, that was all around not for profit, and it meant then we had a leg to stand on when we wanted to lobby the government about particular issues. It hasn't worked. They didn't push that agenda, but a not-for-profit organization has definitely got more of a reason to get deeper ingrained within the government to help them with that shift. But sadly, it's not the case all over the world. Bit of a difficult one, that.
Step by step.
Yeah. So there you go, Roland. I hope that answers some of your questions.
No, sure, James, and it's very interesting the things that you have spoken about, really, especially in the areas of state government, or maybe local municipalities, state government, and national government coming into this to do this kind of support. Really, really interesting. For example, Dr. Daniel, when he was on, he talked about even the Malaysian government helping with creating sandboxes and even funding, for some of these startups, creating accelerator programs, creating funding for some of these startups, to be able to just push the market, forward. Now, a lot of that is happening. We've seen a few global acceleration programs like MetaProp and Techstars, for example, taking people from the African region. Now, my take for both of you is, do you think that accelerator programs are really helping startups? Because the experiences from a lot of founders is that people spend time trying to get into accelerator programs. What would be the advice? I think Tunde went on to say that at some point he just wanted to focus on the product and create a product that helps, and thereafter you would see accelerator programs coming in. So again,
looking 2 seconds, mate. I'll be right back.
Okay, great.
He's gone to get another beer. That's the problem.
I'll start with you, James. What do you think of accelerator programs here?
I think that's such a broad question, Roland. Generally, I'm going to say I think they are very useful if they are run with the right partners, if they are run with the right mentality, and the entrepreneurs go in with their eyes wide open. It's a very general view. We have been on an accelerator program. I can't say it was a huge amount of help, but I would especially say that it's probably useful if you are an entrepreneur, that maybe you're a first-time entrepreneur and you're struggling to understand the challenges. It's lonely. If you're a solopreneur, it's lonely. You don't know what you're doing all the time. You are constantly screwing up. So an accelerator scheme will give you the structure and the framework for you to make those mistakes, but in a controlled environment where you get things out the way really quickly and you can learn from other people as well. Oh, I've tried that, it didn't work. Or I really messed that up and I tried this. So I think generally I would say accelerators are a positive experience. But the one thing I would really urge caution with the entrepreneurs who are looking at accelerator schemes is, what are the terms of the scheme itself? Because some of the accelerators, I mean, they're becoming very big business now. There is a business model that that drives that as a system, and some of them aren't particularly entrepreneur friendly, and very accelerator friendly, and that is where I would definitely urge caution.
Okay, I mean, I think from your point, it's obvious that you want to watch carefully, before getting into accelerator programs. Again, like I said, because a lot of the startups feel getting into that accelerator program helps your network. It provides investors database for you, who will then look at your products and all of that. And so you see, what we have also found is that you find founders, just trying, every now and again to get into that program. But we've seen experiences where it is actually better to continue to build your products, and then maybe you can get a chance, just like you said, the chance of having that incubation sort of, or having other people look at the ideas that you have. So but while waiting for Ashton, right? Now, the other thing that I also really want to talk about, and I know that this is something that you are also helping to do. Okay, are there words for Proptech associations in the region on what we should be doing? There are so many of us. They are coming up by the day. Based on your experience. I mean, it may be a broad question, okay, but what are the easy? What is the easy? Not the easy part, but where are we going to make impact the most in terms of how we begin to organize? And this is for a lot of the Proptech associations, across the region, because like I said, we're having a lot of us coming onto the stream now, trying to organize that Proptech space.
For me, it's a really simple starting point is a Proptech association. The initial perspective is going to be that you have to look after the Proptech audience, and you will naturally in the first year have a considerable amount of engagement with the Proptech industry. And whether you're a not-for-profit or a for-profit, generally there's a membership system involved, and you have to pay X amount of money to be a part of the membership. I would urge caution for any association that thinks it's all about the prop tech industry, because within 2 years that association probably won't be in existence. You have to really consider the property audience almost more than you do the technology audience, because ultimately the property audience is the customer of the technology audience. And in a year or two's time, a technology business is going to look at the membership that it pays an association and says, is it value for money? And yes, they do webinars which help me understand the market, but do they provide any value to finding me customers and clients? Are there any services that I can use to generate revenue? And therefore, I think having one eye always on the property industry to really bring them in closer to the debate, the discussion, the education is absolutely pivotal to the life of a PropTech association.
Okay, great. I think that's a good takeaway, and to just ensure that you're having the entire professionals or players in the value chain, rather than just focusing on PropTech industry alone. You know, okay,
no, definitely.
Okay,
I mean, it's often not thought about, Roland. That's the thing. It's because the easy money and the kudos for having an association is, oh, we've got so many members, but those members will soon drop by the wayside when they haven't got the property industry engaging, because very quickly they're saying, well, I want to speak to these people. If you haven't got the property audience, you won't have an association, is my view.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Ash has got his beer now. Ash is fine. He's happy.
Yep, refill. Thanks, boys. So
okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
So when we set up PropTech Hub WA, yes, it was about the innovators, but from the very day one, our mandate was always about connecting innovation to industry, and that's all. That's what we have to do. We have to connect those innovators that are trying to make something with the industry that have problems, and they don't want to internally do it because it's going to cost a fortune, or they don't want to externally do it because it's going to cost even more. But they can do a trial, and then they can do a small order, and then they can grow that order upwards. And it's that strategy for industry that is so much cheaper than having to do it themselves. And what we've done really successfully is point it to industry and say, look, you don't have to be a part of our ride, but your competitors will. And the competitors that will get this innovation first. And if they do that, they can get the advantage before you. So it's up to you. Do you want the industry? Do you want to come on the ride with us? And do you want to see what these innovators are doing and give it a go? Or do you want to wait and let your competition do it? And what we've found is when we say it like that to industries, they jump on pretty much straight away. To the figures of this. So in PropTech Hub WA, our innovators, their market cap combined is over 500 million Australian dollars, which is 370 US, and 250 billion Australian dollars, which is 180 billion US dollars. So when you put our industry together that have already signed up and are a part of our membership cohort in 261 days, you can see that the innovation group there and the industry group there is ready and raring to go in 2022. And we hope to share some really good case studies with you.
That's very, very instructive, Ashton. And yeah, we will take on that offer really. And I also see how you have dimensioned the markets that enables you to think around which direction to go. I think that's really, 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 really helpful. Jose Maria, we are
absolutely. Like for you guys, you should really be saying to your industry out there, we are doing it. We're in the trenches.
Okay.
We've got the innovators here, and we're growing it. And you can be a part of it or not. And if you don't be a part of it, your competition will be.
Yeah. Night speech. We will take that back to them. Jose Maria, final words, last word. We're wrapping up. I think we just have about 2 or 3 minutes to wrap on this. So final words from you, or maybe comments, questions around everything that has happened for the last 3 hours.
Thank you so much, James and Ash. Really learned a lot in the conversation. I think what I'll take home to Proptech Nigeria essentially is that we have a lot of work cut out for us. It's a very interesting space, right? And we essentially when we started this whole Proptech Nigeria, what we wanted to do was how do we essentially push the message out there to the larger audience, right? How do we educate? How do we help the startups grow? And that's something that's been ingrained in everything that we're doing so far. And I learned a lot from what James was saying with you have to get the conversation going outside just the technology, right? You have to get the real estate stakeholders, the developers, the estate surveyors. These are the people that you have to also get in contact with, because the startups will also need their help to also scale. And that's something really important. Then also focusing more on how do you essentially provide more value to the startups in the ecosystem. I think that's a big takeaway. Getting in contact with the government as well to make sure that policies are very favorable to the startups as well, and to help the entire ecosystem grow properly is something that I really took away from this session. So thank you so much, James, and thank you, Ash. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. As I bring this to a close, I really, really want to thank all our panelists today. Dr. Daniel Gabembro from Proptech Malaysia, Sean Godoy from South Africa Proptech, Precious Luanga from Cutstrut in UK and Nigeria, Tunde Balogun, Rent Small from Nigeria, Emeka Ndukwe from Co-Fundi, Ghana. Of course, special thanks to Ashton, Proptech in Western Australia, and James Jesley from UNESCO in the UK. Big thank you for all. I think also want to thank the African Union for Housing Conference for enabling us have this Proptech Masterclass. They believe very strongly that Proptech is the way to go, and they continue to provide this platform for us to continue to have conversations. Special thanks also to API Events for putting all of this together, and for the Center of Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, based out of Johannesburg in South Africa, for constantly helping in pushing the narrative about PropTech in the region. Recently, I think they just launched the 2021 edition of the yearbook. You guys can look it up at Center for Affordable Housing Finance, where you can find research, detailed research on housing finance in Africa. And then there are conversations around PropTech from some of the African countries also in the yearbook. And so on that note, I want to say a big thank you to all our panelists, and we're going to keep engaging. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You.
This is the point to say bye-bye. All right.